Okay, we can do the clap with her barking. So let's do the clap. Ready?
Right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'll do the countdown again. Let's do this again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to It's a Fandom Thing. I'm your host, Erin Marlowe, and we are wrapping up my birthday month with a look at the greatest fictional character ever created. And you cannot argue with us about this. We will not hear it. We're not here for that. We're just here to celebrate this character, Dean Winchester, played, of course, by Jensen Ackles. I am wearing my Samulet thing, and I'm also wearing a bracelet that just says keep calm and carry on, my wayward son. I'm not wearing a Dean shirt. I know I should have probably worn a Dean shirt, but I'm not. I don't think any of us are wearing Dean shirts. I don't I Are
I'm
you,
wearing
Paula?
green. Does that count?
You're wearing green for his
I'm
eyes.
wearing green for his eyes,
We will
which
count
was totally not intentional.
that. Well, we will say it was intentional. Although
Of
everybody's
course
going
it
to be
was.
watching this and hearing this, and they're going to know. So, if you're, I decided I'd release this as a video one too. So, welcome if you're watching this as well. We haven't released a lot of video episodes lately, so I wanted to do this one as a video because it is special because of who we're talking about. Our outline, the outline I created is very long and it only just scratches the surface as far as like the way I did it. I am seriously, if you've listened to our pop culture and fandom news episode from earlier this week, I am seriously contemplating doing next year a whole month of Dean centered episodes or doing an offshoot podcast called It's a Dean Thing. I am not kidding about this because I have, been revisiting Supernatural. And while Dean never stopped being my favorite character ever, I just have fallen so much more in love with this character, and it just makes me wanna just do a whole podcast talking about him because there's so much stuff to discuss, and we will just be scratching the surface, and I know people are gonna be like, "Why didn't you talk about this?" And I know people will probably disagree with us on some things here. I do wanna say from the offset, we all the 3 of us love this character, and so if you don't love this character, you're going to probably hate this episode. I don't know why you're listening or watching because you're going to probably hate this episode. I have some strong opinions on some other characters that will come up a little bit later when we get into Dean's relationships. So that'll come up, and I will give you warnings there because, we all have different opinions. And I know this fandom, the supernatural fandom, the SPN family, there's so much infighting, so much fighting, so many different factions, so many ship wars galore. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of drama in this fandom, but let's try and be nice. These are just our opinions. So, let's honor and respect that. I know people disagree. I also apologies to my other panelists that are also probably angry that they don't get to be on this episode. But that's why we'll do more Dean episodes and you'll be able to be on it. So, this just happened to be put together almost not last minute, but it wasn't something that was planned and it was only going to happen if the strike ended, and it did. So, we could gush about Dean. And I'm so happy that Paula and Susi are here to gush about Dean Winchester with me. I know they both love him as much as I do. And so I do want to give, though, before we talk about Dean, I think it's very important to give trigger warnings when you're talking about this character. Big trigger warning for suicide and suicidal ideation. I think that is a big thing here. Depression, PTSD, self-loathing behavior, alcoholism. Um, it This might come up of, in fact, I'm pretty positive it's going to come up. Queer baiting. Um, there might be homophobia might be mentioned. So I'm just giving some trigger warnings there. Of course, when you're talking about supernatural, there's violence and death and all of that kind of stuff too. So, but I kind of think that's a given with this show. But I just wanted to give those trigger warnings. And I'm not really going to give too much of a background on Dean, because if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you're a Supernatural fan. We're going to spoil everything. It's been on forever. It's, and started in 2005, right? I will say Dean was born on January 24th, 1979, making him an Aquarius. The actor who plays him, Jensen Ackles, is a Pisces. I don't know why this is important. I'm just mentioning it. I will say, when we come talk about relationships, I'm just saying this. Do not jump down my throat, people. Okay. People have often said with Aquarians that some Aquarians tend to be bisexual. I am not saying that this was done necessarily purposely when the character was created, because I don't know if everybody knows that stuff. I've just heard that a lot, that Aquarians tend to be that way. I'm not saying all Aquariuses are. Once again, I am okay. So I'm just putting that little anecdote in there just because. Okay. Well, what I first want to start out with, and I know this is like a question that might take up the whole podcast. I don't know. And I may have to cut you off after 2 hours. But Paula, I know this is a hard question to answer, but why do you love Dean Winchester?
I mean, how can you not love Dean Winchester? That's the real question. um, I think because there is a certain amount of relatability to him. I am also an older sibling who, in various ways, had to be somewhat of a caretaker to a younger sibling, and um, so that was very relatable. Um, issues with, starting off with his father being absent, with John being absent a lot, and then later seasons with Mary coming back and then, abandoning them for periods of time was extremely relatable. Um, because I have a mother that is absent, and so a lot of those storylines were very relatable to me, and just the way that he um was kind of forced to grow up a little bit too fast because he had to be that caretaker. So there was a lot of relatability to the character, and also just the way Jensen portrayed it. There's this weight on his shoulders, because he feels he has to literally save the world, but there's also this boyishness to him, this childlike attitude in some things that was just um, fun to see. Um, Despite all of the pain and the anger and the hurt that he experienced, there was still this playfulness about him that I really liked. And to be honest, if it wasn't for Dean, I would not have continued watching the series. I only started watching it because we were some friends and I, we were going to be playing a tabletop RPG game, and my friend was basing it on Supernatural. And so they're like, you have to watch the show. And that was the only reason I started watching it. And the only reason I stuck with it was because of Dean.
Yep.
Not to say that there weren't characters later that I came to love, but he was the reason why I stuck with it through the whole run.
Yeah. And Susie, why do you love Dean Winchester?
To me, the question is, why doesn't everyone love Dean Winchester? Because he, out of all the characters in Supernatural, he is my number one top favorite. It, like, it's 10 out of 10. Like, I love him so much. And it's not just because Jensen Ackles is hot, which he is, respect, looking disrespectfully at times. But it's the fact that, like, this character that has existed for, I think, a little over 15 years. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, because if you look at the
15 years.
Winchester spinoff, yeah.
Yeah, so 15 years, a little bit longer. It could have any point become very like one note, very flat, but each time, each season, each kind of appearance, he just gives him so much life and so much character. This is like a fully fleshed out person and a fully fleshed out character. And I love that. And he has so much depth. Like the fact that he had to grow up so fast to become like a mother and a father for his little brother and trying to give him as much of a normal childhood as he could, even though he and his father and his brother had to have a very transient lifestyle due to the aspect of hunting, and the fact that he just raised his little brother. Like he raised him. He taught him all the things, but he tried to let Sammy have as much of a normal life as he could, because that was kind of out of his reach for him, because he had to grow up so fast and he had to be the adult that was present because his father just wasn't. His father was just like, okay, I have you two. I'm just going to drop you off here and I'm going to go off and do whatever. And he was like, okay, I'm going to try to give Sammy the most normal, like, Christmas that I can, even though I'm just a kid myself. And the fact that he just, and that kind of same level of care and love isn't extended to only Sammy. It's extended to almost everyone that he comes across in his life. And because he cares about everyone so deeply, and every kind of loss that he has throughout the whole series run, he carries it with him, and he remembers it so much, and and even for people that he just barely meets for even like an episode, he cares. And it's just it's very heartbreaking, but what I also love about him too is that when he's given the opportunity to like experience moments of levity and kind of childishness and like nerdness, he embraces them wholeheartedly. Like when he gets to just, it's a small moment, and it's actually and I remember from a TikTok that like Erin sent me, where he gets his room in the bunker and he decorates it because it had been so long that he was able to have something like that. And now that he's able to have more of like a stable sort of like home in one place where he doesn't have to keep moving, he's like, oh, I'm going to decorate this to how I want it to be. And he sets up his little guns. He sets up his memory foam mattress because it remembers him, and the picture of his mom that he carried around in his wallet of something that encapsulated one of the happiest memories of his childhood. It's just, it's very sweet, and I love him for just the amount of depth that he has, and how much of just, it's a wonderful portrayal. Like I just love Dean so much.
Yeah, I mean, what both Paula and Susie have said about, like, how can you not love this character? And I know there are people that don't. Sadly, I do know that. I started watching Supernatural because, I honestly was like, I had heard of the show. I didn't know it had a huge fandom. I had heard of it and was like, I'll probably never watch that show. It sounds silly and cheesy and whatever. And then Netflix kept recommending it to me, and I had been a fan of Jensen Ackles since his time on Days of Our Lives. So I have been a fan of that of him as an actor for a long time. And then I went, okay, I'll give it a chance. And from the very beginning, Dean was my absolute favorite character. And what I love about Dean is just how beautiful he is. I don't think everybody gives Dean enough credit for how absolutely beautiful he is. He is so caring. I know people say Dean is not an emotional person and that he is like Sam is a lot more emotional. I think he is the most emotional character on the show. I think everything he does, and I was so grateful in 15, 18 that he was told this by Cass, Everything Dean does is because of love. He is just pure love. And sadly, he doesn't love himself, but he loves everybody else so much. And he is so protective of everybody. And he does have this thing of he feels every single thing that happens in the world is his fault and his responsibility. And a lot of that was because of the way he was raised and, frankly, his abuse by his child neglect and child abuse. I'm not talking about physical abuse because we don't know that, but like mental abuse, in my opinion, from his father. And that turned into him wanting to protect everybody. And of course, it does start with Sam or Sammy, and he did raise his little brother. But I think it also extends to anyone in his vicinity. I mean, you see that he is usually the last person to give up on somebody. You saw that a lot in season 6 with Cass, is he was refusing to believe that Cass was betraying them at all until it was right in his face. And that's just who he is he believes in everybody else. You just always wish he would believe in himself more and have faith in himself more. And I love this character too, because I have never, ever, ever, ever related to a character the way I relate to this character. I see myself in this character in ways that are even sort of hard to describe. And usually when I see myself in a character, I don't like that character. So it's a very different experience with Dean because excuse me, sorry, because I love this character deeply. I really deeply care about this character. And um, watching him through the years and watching all the trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma and death after, I mean, he's died more than any other character, mainly because of the mystery spot episode, but he has died so much. But the trauma after trauma that he has been through, that they never gave him a chance to really fully heal or deal with. And yet he still has these moments of humor and joy, and he is like a little kid sometimes, and I mean that in a good way. Like in the episode Beyond the Mat, when he like he sees, one of his favorite wrestlers, and then he has a moment where he goes into the wrestling ring and he's pretending to be a wrestler, and it is the most adorable thing in the world. And here he is. This is season 11. He has already been to purgatory. He's been to hell. He's been a demon. He's been, the mark of Cain happened. All this horrendous stuff has happened. And here he is playing like a wrestler. The fact that he can still do that after all that pain shows you what a beautiful character he is. And I'm not trying to say that people have been through trauma and can't do that or not beautiful, but the fact that he can still find joy is a really beautiful thing and really remarkable, and says a lot for his strength and just who he is. And I really do think he's pure love. He's just pure love. And he is the reason I kept watching this show. And I know there are things he's done that I've defended that I maybe shouldn't defend, but I just can't help it. I feel for him deeply. I think he deserves the world. I think he deserved a lot better than he got. I think he deserved a lot better writing sometimes. But even when the writing to me was like the writers didn't understand who Dean was. This happened a lot, I think, in the later seasons after season 11. Even when the writers seemed to not know who Dean was or seemed to really want to me, it seemed like they wanted to destroy his character, honestly. You still, because Jensen Ackles knows this character so well and loves this character, because of that performance, you still saw Dean. No matter what the writing was, no matter what the storyline was, no matter if you didn't like the season, at least for me, you could always love Dean because of what a beautiful character he is and because of the performance. Because honestly, Jensen Ackles should have at least won 3 Emmy Awards for this performance, if not more. The stuff he does with his eyes, the stuff he does with his face. We could do a whole episode talking about Dean Winchester and mirrors, because he has so many scenes of looking at himself that are like, there's so much meaning in them. And a lot of that is because of Jensen's performance. Nobody cries like Jensen Ackles. And Dean Winchester has a lot of crying. And there's a way he does it that makes you cry. And he has chemistry with everybody. Every single person on this show, I think he has chemistry with. And I think everybody kind of falls in love with Dean Winchester. Even the villains, Crowley clearly is in love with Dean Winchester. Very, very clearly in love with Dean Winchester. So, yeah. So those are my rambly thoughts about why I love Dean Winchester. But, when we do our It's a Dean thing, the very first episode will be why we love Dean Winchester. And we can just do like a whole 2 hours about it, because there's so much more I want to say. But before we just spend the whole time on that topic, we have a lot of stuff to discuss here. So we're first going to start with discussing Dean's storylines and mental health struggles, because I think it's very important also to talk about the mental health struggles with this character, the mental health struggles that don't get addressed enough. But anyway, so I know this is actually, I think the next question is going to be harder. But so Paula, what are 3 of your favorite Dean-centric storylines?
Okay, so the Purgatory storyline, Demon Dean, and both those storylines, I think, really could have benefited from more exploration. There were so many missed opportunities with Purgatory. He could have come across, people that he had killed before that are now in Purgatory. Emma was there, total I'm sorry, but I will forever be an Emma apologist. That was such a missed opportunity with Emma. He could have, that could have been explored and maybe gotten some closure there. There's so much more that they could have done with both those storylines. I know why they didn't go further with the Demon Dean storyline, but he played that to perfection. And it was so interesting because I saw it more of just Dean without the weight that he had of caring for people, basically, as much as he does, because he is, like you said, pure love, and he cares so deeply about everybody. And I saw a clip of an interview that he did about Demon Dean, where he basically took everything that was Dean and tried to do the exact opposite. And so that's what you got with Demon Dean. And so that would have been interesting to see more of that. And then I also really liked the Mark of Cain, because it really kind of explored that anger that he also holds within him, because it was said in one of the episodes, I can't remember which one, where the Mark of Cain doesn't turn you into something you aren't. It just kind of amplifies something that's already within you. And because of the way he was raised by John, he wasn't able to express those emotions. Because like you said, he does feel, he does care. There's a lot of feeling there. He just had to bury it. And when he's scared, he gets angry. When someone he loves gets hurt, he gets angry. So all of that anger came out of him, and that was what you were seeing with the Mark of Cain. So, that storyline was one of my top favorite storylines with him.
Yes. And Susie, what are your 3?
So I also really like the Purgatory Dean storyline, because even when we see him come back from Purgatory, we see him like dealing with everything that he went through there and what he had to do to survive Purgatory, because it wasn't all rainbows and kids. It was a rough rough landscape where everyone was out for themselves, and he did his best. Bless his heart, he did his best, and we see him with the aftermath of that. And but I also really enjoyed Demon Dean because it's a little bit saucy, especially when he's just tearing through the bunker and is like, Sammy, being all tough and breaking down doors, and just know he can carry you around like a rag doll. Oh, I'm so glad that I'm wearing like blush so that you can't tell the actual blush that's going on right now. I'm hiding it. Yeah, but I also enjoy the storyline of Dean when he's kind of freshly risen from hell. Especially because we see him have flashbacks of kind of like what he went through, and then we get these different like episodes and points where he and Sam are talking about it, and he kind of tells him like, oh, I had to torture people and do these things, like, oh, it may have been just a very short time here, but down there it was years upon years that I was doing all of this. And we see him talk about it a little bit, but then we also get kind of like a little glimpse of just what he was going through and what he was dealing with, and how that very unfairly adds to everything else he has going on in his poor little brain. And oh man, I think everyone will agree with me here that I think the most perfect resolution that Supernatural could have had was to send Dean to therapy and just stop hunting. Let this man retire with Miracle in the bunker, just chilling, and then then he goes to therapy and he works everything out, and he just unpacks everything. I feel like that could have been great. I could have survived the whole spinoff of just that, because he needs more love and he needs more understanding, I feel, because of all the shit that he has to put up with. Pardon my French.
No, I agree. Yes, so that'll give me a chance right now to plug my fic, my series, Dean in Therapy, where I do give Dean therapy, and I do give Dean a dog too. It's not Miracle, because this was started before that dog existed. It is a dog based on a dog that I knew when I used to volunteer at a shelter. It is a pit bull, because I felt with how misunderstood Dean is, and pit bulls are misunderstood too. And so I do give that. There does end up being a love story between Dean and Donna. That's not until the 5th part of the series. I have had Destiel shippers tell me they were very hesitant because of the fact that Cass is the only one they want to see Dean with, and they've said they're okay. They liked it, and it worked out well. So I'm just putting that out there. And I'm very proud of that fic, and I won't spoil the way it ends, but I did that was my impetus for doing that, was that I always thought this character deserved, and I don't like to say the word needs, like in the fact of like a punishment, but he deserved that healing. He deserved therapy. I know all the characters did, but he deserved therapy, and I really wish he had gotten it. So if you want to check that out, it is Dean in Therapy. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes, and you can read that, because I am actually very proud of it. It was a fic I'd worked on and off for 8 years, and I finally finished it this year. So yeah. There is thank you. There's a tiny bit of smut. There's a lot of trigger warnings in that fic though. So just, you'll have to heed them. I'm very good about putting them in there. For me, and I'm pretty much repeating a lot of stuff. I cheated here. I put Mark of Cain and Demon Dean is the same. Because they kind of were they're not the same person, but it's the same arc. And I think season 9 to season 10 are two of the best seasons for Dean, period. And I think that's because of these storylines. And I know that people that are on the opposite end don't like those seasons because of these storylines, but I think these storylines are so good because, yes, Mark of Cain Dean is very different than Demon Dean. Mark of Cain Dean is very angry, sad, depressed, suicidal, honestly, and just wants other people to hurt a lot. But he's like taking all of his internal hurt out on other people. But Jensen does such a good job with it that for me, you never end up hating Dean. I'm not saying I liked some of the things he did and some of the way he talked, but that's the way you could really distinguish that it wasn't fully Dean. It wasn't the Dean that we love, like the way he would talk in the finale, the season 10 finale, the way Mark of Cain Dean talks about a girl that they are trying to find and talks about the way she's dressed and calls her horrible names and the way he is with the parents. It's like it's just like full blown, I'm not going to have any filter anymore, and loses some of the empathy, although a lot of what he's doing is because he feels so much. And yes, I think we all agree on this panel that Charlie's death was ridiculous and it was done to bring out this anger more. However, I think the episode Prisoner is one of the best episodes of Supernatural ever because it's so interesting to watch Dean in that when he is full blown. That's his anger, that's his grief, that's his rage at every single person really that he has lost, basically, at the universe. I think it's not just about Charlie, it's about everybody he's lost, and him, and the scene where he's butchers the Stein family is not only just amazing and incredible acting and such an interesting dynamic of Dean, it's also to get in the very superficial side. It's one of the hottest scenes in the whole series. Oh my gosh. when he pulls off the bandit, not, the mouth thing. Now, you know what I'm talking about. He pulls that down when he knocks down the door. Just everything, even when he's covered in the blood. I mean, I'm sorry, it is very hot. I'm not saying it's sexy when he beats up Cass. I want to just make that disclaimer because I don't think any of those scenes are sexy. But yes, so I think that's amazing. And then the Demon Dean side of it, it is great. What I loved about Demon Dean is because you get to finally see a Dean that doesn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders. And he's just having fun. No, he's not a good guy, but he's still just having fun. I mean, he's singing bad karaoke. He's having really great sex. He's doesn't care about anything. He doesn't even care about baby. That's when you know he's really gone. He doesn't even care about the car. And it's just great to see a character that has like the weight of the world all the time on his shoulders finally not have that weight. And yes, we deserved more of it. I understand, like Paula said, why they didn't do it. I think there are a couple of reasons. Number one, the 200th episode was coming up and they had to do the fan fiction one. They couldn't have him be a demon during that. And also because I think they felt that if they kept him as a demon, fans would turn against the character and not like Dean anymore, not be able to forgive him. But I still think we deserved more. And he was also incredibly, incredibly sexy. I know that you shouldn't be rooting for a demon, but he was pretty hot to watch. And I loved Crowley and him in those scenes too. That was a different dimension too. And with the Mark of Cain storyline, Crowley was so essential to that too. So, and that's when Crowley fell in love with Dean. And I'm going to mention Hell again. And Hell from season 3 through season 4, some of 5, but then the show forgot that Dean ever went to hell. I really think they forgot. It drove me nuts whenever hell stuff would come up. They very rarely ever mentioned that Dean was there. The times when he had to go to hell in later seasons, it wasn't like brought up that this might be traumatic for Dean because he was in hell for basically what amounted to 40 years. It felt like 40 years. And I know people say, well, he did horrible stuff and, he tortured people, but there is nothing in me that ever had struggled with forgiving him for that, because he didn't start torturing people until he was there for 30 years of torture. And then he did. And I'm sorry, but I think most human beings, if you were to be put through torture for that long, and the kind of torture that he probably was put through, there's no way you wouldn't have got. I don't see how anyone. I know his dad didn't, supposedly, but I do not understand how you wouldn't have ended up doing that. So I never ever was mad at him for that. I know he hates himself for that, but I was never mad at him for that. And the scene when he finally tells Sam what he did and confesses is one of the most amazing Emmy Award worthy scenes in the whole series. And the way Jensen plays that, and the line of, I wish I couldn't feel anything, Sammy. I wish I couldn't feel a damn thing. I wish I couldn't feel anything, And I think that's the way Dean feels 99.9% of the time. And I think that's why when you see him as a demon, it's such a different Dean, because he doesn't feel anything except for pleasure. He wants to feel pleasure, but he doesn't feel anything for anybody else. And so that's like the version of Dean that actually doesn't get to feel anything because he feels so deeply. And then lastly, because I know I put the Mark of Cain and Demon Dean together, but I did cheat. Sorry, it's my show. It's my birthday. Purgatory, which we deserved more of Purgatory. And I love that idea that you said, Paula, with Emma, running into Emma there. Oh my gosh, that would have been really interesting to see. What an interesting dynamic that would have been, to have to confront her. And she probably would have been angry and pissed at her dad for killing her. And that would have been just really interesting to explore that further. And then of course I love Purgatory too, because it gave us one of my other favorite characters, Benny. I love Benny. Benny was the greatest friend ever to Dean, ever, period, hands down. I do love Cass, but I think Benny was the best friend Dean ever had in his life. And I loved Benny so much. He was a better brother. I'm sorry, but he was a better brother. And I
You're
loved him.
not wrong.
Thank you. I loved him. And I wanted Dean in season 8 to just go, Sam, go off with Amelia. Snooze Fest Amelia, go off with that storyline. And I'm going to go hunt with Benny and Cass. And that's what I'm going to do. We needed more Benny. Benny was amazing. I understand there are issues with the actor who plays him, but the character, loved that character so much. And I loved also that through that relationship, Dean became even more empathetic towards monsters, because he saw in Benny was a vampire, that not everything is black and white. And I really enjoyed that he got to experience that too. So yes, I love Benny and I love Purgatory. And we needed more of that. And I always think it's so fascinating that even though that was I think there's a lot of trauma from that Dean also found some peace in that. That was like, he liked it because it was so pure, as he says. Maybe he liked it because he had a break from Sam. We would never admit that, but
Well, for once, he
warning.
didn't have to take care of his little brother. I mean,
yeah, I should have said up front, I have major issues with Sam. So big warning for Sam girls out there. I have major issues with Sam. So yeah. Paula, I know you were going to want to throw things at me, hit me. I don't know what you want to do, and we're not going to go each showrunner because we're not going to have time looking at how much time we've been recording already. But what are 3, just 3? It's okay if we repeat, everybody, by the way. But what are 3 of your favorite Dean episodes?
oh God, this was so hard too. Okay, so, and I did go by like era just in case we were able to do that, but no. So my very number one favorite episode with Dean is regarding Dean. Okay, that one was a very that one I sobbed with this episode, okay? My grandfather had dementia and passed away just a few months after this episode aired, so it was very personal to me. And his portrayal of someone who was forgetting themselves was just so spot on, because he had those moments of discovering something about himself that was just pure joy, and then the terror of forgetting himself and his family. um Having watched my grandfather go through that, that's something that terrifies me, of just forgetting who I am and forgetting the people I love. And so that episode, if I could only watch one episode of Supernatural, that would probably be it, because it was so, his portrayal in that show, in that episode, was just phenomenal. Of all of his, I mean, every performance he gives in that character, of those really tough storylines, is just stellar, but that one just really hit close to home for me. Um, Another one that was also very personal for me was Who We Are, and that was the one where he went into Mary's mind after she had been brainwashed and, was killing the other hunters, and was trying to kill Sam and Dean, and they caught her, and he was trying to get her back, and he had that cathartic moment of just being able to lay it all out of, I hate you, but I love you. I had to be Sam's mother and his father, and that wasn't fair. And it wasn't fair to him. It wasn't fair to me, and all of that. And I've said before, I have some very um, complicated feelings about my own mother. So being able to see him do that was, again, not just cathartic for him, but it was a little cathartic for me too, to be able to see that performance. And then the other one was The Prisoner, and that was when he went after the Steins, and God, that was hot. I mean,
It
it's
was. Oh my
terrible to
God.
say, but oh my God. But also, it's just the fact that, again, he loves the people that he loves so much, that that little bit of revenge that he got to have for just everybody that he's lost was really good to see, even though it was a terrible thing to do. Those people just, they needed to be dealt with, and damn, did he deal with them.
Oh yeah, that's my Roman Empire right there.
Yes,
That
yes,
scene.
for sure.
That and the scene in Baby where he does the full 180 with Baby.
Oh, that one. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, it's hard to pinpoint just episodes sometimes, but there's
Yeah.
so many just little moments, little scenes. Because there was the one where they, I can't remember which episode it was, where they escaped after they, supposedly killed the president, and they had gotten away from that secret bunker that they were being held at. And he's like, "We're not trapped out here with you. You're trapped out here with us." Oh my God, that was a great line. Like, that was honorable mention to that episode.
Yes, sir. Honey, there ain't no other men like me.
No, there's not.
When he
There never will
does.
be again.
A scene that shouldn't be sexual, but it's very, oh my God.
Right?
Yes.
Dean gives us very complicated feelings, okay? Okay.
Yes, the things I would let this fictional character do to me, I just want to say, any iteration of this fictional character, the things I would let him do to me. Oh my
Like, if
God.
this was a real human being, we'd be like, "Okay, this person needs to be in
Oh yeah.
locked away, not near people," but it's hard not to forgive him, okay?
I know.
Like, let him do
I
that,
know.
and then I just wanna wrap him in a blanket and give him, hot cocoa and soup or something, because he deserves all the love.
Yes. He does deserve the love. So Susie, I'm sure this was hard for you too. Um, that's what she said. So
Oh, I wish.
so what are you three of your
Um,
favorite Dean episodes?
Oh, just to briefly echo what Paula said with the whole like, oh no, it's very much that trope of like, if you encounter this in real life, it's like, dear God, get away from me. Like, no, red flags, get away. But fiction, it's like, hold on a second, maybe. Let's not be too hasty. Hold on. Fictional, sir. Real life, no. On my end, and I mentioned this earlier. I like when Dean is given a chance to be silly and nerdy and kind of show more of his like softer, goofier side. So I really enjoy LARP and the Real Girl, where he gets involved in the world of LARP, especially at the end when he has the Braveheart like esque face paint and he's just giving the speech. And he's wearing like a better wig than was in the finale. And it's just, and he has the best time doing that. And then the other one is also, and it's a lot later in the series. It's a Tombstone. This is near the end, oy vey. But I love that he gets to just live his fun little cowboy fantasy. Like he's like, oh, it's the Wild West, and he gets so excited and then he gets out his little hat. He's like, oh, I'm gonna wear it. And he's just, just seeing him experience moments of joy is truly such a gift because he just has the best time. And my other favorite episode of where he's just being a silly little guy is Dog Dean Afternoon, where he basically turns into, like his whole fight that he has with the pigeon. Like he's just gonna shoot this pigeon for pooping on baby. It's just so funny. Tim's like, please calm down. There are other people out here in the world with us. They can see what you're doing. He's like, no. But like, oh, like I love when he's able to have those moments of like levity because it also shows you like the other side of him, like the goofy fun side. And I love that when we're able to see that from any character in general, because like it's just fun to see people be goofy and have a silly fun time and kind of indulge in their interests. And that's very much something that we get to see in especially in like those episodes that I mentioned, because it's just him being a silly little goose, and I love it.
Yeah, he's and Jensen does such a good job in the Dog Dean Afternoon episode, because he's so, the way he plays the part where he's like, when he's yelling at the mailman, he's like, you.
And
Oh my
Sam's
God.
throwing the wadded up paper into the trash can, and he keeps going and retrieving it. It's like
And
we're
he
just
does
playing
it so
catch.
well. Because that, on paper, that is the stupidest, most ridiculous storyline. But he does it so well that it's one of my favorite. It's not on my top. Well, it's so hard to do a top 3 because they change constantly. But that's, I can watch that episode a lot. I love that episode. That was the first episode I showed Fergie when we got Fergie, because I'm like, she'll react to this episode because there are dogs, and she was like this the whole
Oh,
time.
funny.
She's just like watching it in rapt attention. But yeah, he's so good at that, because Jensen is very good at the drama, but he's very good at comedy. Very good at comedy. And yeah, great
And
picks from
also,
all of you.
you can't tell me that Dean Winchester does not like to play dress up, and he would have been a fantastic cosplayer.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he's such a geek. He's such a
absolutely.
He
geek.
really is.
And I mean that
And
as a compliment. He's such a
oh
geek.
yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
He would have
whenever
been
he's given a chance to wear like a fun, silly little outfit, he takes it. He's like,
Every
I'm gonna
time he
indulge
has
in
a
this
chance
and
to
do
dress
that.
up as a character, something, he does it, and he goes all out, and I love it.
Yes, he would have been he'd be a guest panelist on this show. Geeking out
Yeah.
about something. He definitely would. Yes. I love that about him. And for me, and this was so hard, I have so many written down, and I've changed my mind like 3 times while we've been sitting here. But the first one I want to mention, this is one I always mention when I'm talking about favorite episodes, period. But and even though there's a lot of sadness and sorrow in this episode, but from season 4, On the Head of a Pin, where you see him with Alistair and he's torturing Alistair basically. And then he also finds out that he's the one that started the apocalypse. And it's such a painful episode to watch, and it's very dark, and the actor who plays Alistair is so fantastic and creepy as hell. That's back when demons were really creepy on the show. And watching Dean's face, though, like when he will face Alistair and he's really menacing, and then when he turns away from him and you see this very scared person, because he's like, I don't want to go back to torturing. I was trying to get away from that, and here I'm having to do that. And who will I be? And then realizing, because Dean, I think for most of his life, has always wanted to be like his dad. And then to find out that his dad withstood all that torture and didn't break the seal, and then he did, it was like this huge letdown. He's like, oh, once again, I can't be as good as my dad. And the final scene when he's in the hospital and he's talking to Cass, and he's like, I guess, I let both our dads down, and it's too big and I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't stop the end of the world. Just amazing performance there. And it is a painful episode that I have a hard time rewatching because it's so much pain from his side, but I think it's a really, really well done episode. And I think Jensen is so fantastic in that. And you also see, I think that's one of the first, you see it a bit before, but that's one of the first where you really also see Cass questioning everything that he's doing. And that's all because of Dean. And so I think I like it for that too. So I think that's a really, really, really good episode. I am going to second regarding Dean, and thank you for sharing the stuff, Paula, too, about your grandfather. And I am very sorry. That's, that's a very, my grandma's not to that point. She remembers us, but she also has she's having a hard time with her memory too. But that episode, I really think season two, that wasn't season 2, Erin, season 12. I think season 12 would have benefited with having this be a story arc where it wasn't just a one episode arc regarding Dean. I honestly think it could have been explored further of watching a character that has been through so much trauma and watching them forget the trauma, but then also the trauma of forgetting the trauma. Would have been so interesting to delve deeper and have it be slower and have it be drawn out more. Because it's to me, it almost feels like a movie, that episode, because of the way it starts and the way it ends. And when you get that end of just watching him riding the bull, and that is before he loses his memory. And so it's like almost like a parallel of seeing the character being free and having a little bit of that, little boy stuff that we love so much about Dean. And that giddiness of riding that bull, plus it's sexy as hell, of course. But I really wish that had been a story arc, because it's so fascinating with a character like Dean to watch him go through that. It's sad, it's heartbreaking. The scene in the bathroom, in the mirror, once again, a mirror scene where he is trying to repeat everybody's name, and then when he doesn't remember, and his eyes, oh my gosh, the expression in his eyes and the sorrow and the feeling lost and the hurt, it's just, oh. And I just recently did a TikTok talking about my love for Rowena. I really love the character of Rowena, and when I've been rewatching, I've fallen more in love with this character. I actually think next to Dean, she's the only other character that I don't have go back and forth on sometimes. And I loved her in that episode, and I loved her scenes with Dean. And when she like opens up to Dean and becomes vulnerable with Dean, he's just like, why are you telling me this? Because you won't remember. But it's such an interesting dynamic. So that could have even been explored more. The fact that you see him, like, as opposed to the episode Yellow Fever, when he's afraid of everything. And so he's like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe we hunt monsters. This is so stupid. I quit. In this one, it's more like he's, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Look what we do. Wait a minute. Our best friend is an angel. That's so amazing. And he's so excited about this stuff, like a little kid. And I think to explore that would have been really fascinating and heartbreaking and sad. And I just wish that had been more of a story arc. I think it would have been much more interesting than the British Men of Letters. Um, and I just wish they could have explored that more, because I think it is. It's an episode in the past week, I've watched this episode 5 times. I am not kidding. And I really, yeah, and the mirror scene will always, yeah. And just little lines he has in there, some of the funny lines, like when Rowena comes there and he's just like, "Oh, your hair. I love your hair. It's so bouncy." It's so bouncy. And just the way he says it. And then when Sam's like, "Do you remember HBO?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Do you remember Cinemax?" And he's, "Oh, Skinemax." And then when he doesn't go sit down and he's looking at Rowena and he's like, "Oh, is this like live Skinemax?" it's this little throwaway line, but it's so cute. And then when he sits there, I still want to know who that voodoo doll was for, because you never know. And when Rowena gives it to him to play with, and he's just like poking that thing. Oh my gosh, it's
I
so
had
cute.
visions of some random person just feeling every
I
single one
know.
of those.
Yes. And then, I mean, even the little lines, like when he says to Rowena, and you can see she's kind of touched by it, of like, I think I think you have plenty of snuff, and just that kind of, like, just like giving her these compliments that Dean would have, wouldn't do, uh, if he remembered. But just the little things that he did in that episode, even the little thing with the bunny in the beginning, and just everything, the waffles, and all these little moments. And when he's trying to read his lips, and salsa, you mittens. Like, "Oh, I don't read lips." So it just would have been great to explore that more, I think. But yeah. And then lastly, I think the season 9 has a lot of my favorite Dean centric episodes. But I think the episode Bad Boys is such a great one. And the actor who plays young Dean in that, when you learn that Dean was sent to a boys' home by John, because he stole peanut butter and bread. Yes, he lost money, but he's a flippin' 16, and he stole peanut butter and bread for Sam, not for himself. Very clearly for Sam. And then getting there and having Sonny be basically a better dad than his dad ever was. Having that first love with Robin, and you see him as a 16-year-old who, he's very nervous with girls, and he's not like that as much later. He does have those moments, but you see that where he's like insecure teenager going through that. And that actor is the best younger version of Dean, hands down. I mean, ever. Because he feels like Dean. His mannerisms are like Dean. The way he talks, the way he even looks. He was, to me, the most believable younger Dean we've had on the show. And I just love that episode, because you get to see Dean be happy outside of hunting. And you also get to hear him say he doesn't like that life, because I think people just assume he loves it. And I'm not saying there isn't a part of him that does, but I think deep down he has a love-hate relationship with it. And I think there's a big part of him that wants out of that, but he feels such a strong sense of duty. So that's why I just love that episode so much. I really do. And I love the scene when they're at the restaurant, and it flashes back and forth, and he goes there because he wants to see Robin. And when she comes over, and he's just like, "Bet you never thought you'd see me here again." And she plays it like she doesn't know who he is. And the little brief moment of like utter devastation, the teen him is like, "Oh, this girl that was like the first girl I ever liked, and she doesn't remember me." It's just so sad. And then I also appreciate that episode, because I know it was focused on the wrestling part, but people like to say Dean isn't smart. The show likes to say sometimes Dean isn't smart. Dean is flippin' really smart. And Dean got a GED, and he did not need to get a GED. There was no reason, really, that he had to necessarily do that. It's not a requirement for being a hunter to have a GED. And he took the time to get a GED. And people need to remember he's smart. And it just drives me nuts. So anyway, excuse me. It's one of my pet peeves.
Oh, we could go on a whole nother rant about that.
Oh, I know. I almost put that on here, and then I was like, no, I've got too much stuff to talk about. But we'll do that at some point.
Yeah, I could talk about that for hours. He's so smart, guys. He built an EMF reader. Like,
he does so
not
much
just
stuff.
that. There's
That's
other
so
stuff.
smart.
Like, come on.
And the random quotes from books that he'll just, and Sam will just look at him. It's like, dude, I read. Well, oh, yes.
I know it and I hate it when in later seasons they seem to forget that he's smart. I'm like, why are you trying to dumb him down? He's not dumb. He's so not dumb. It's so annoying to me. But I talk about that a lot in my fanfic. I'm plugging my fanfic again. I have a whole scene with him and Donna where that is talked about, and where I have Donna say to him, "I bet you were smart though," and him being like, "Oh, how would you? Why would you think I'm smart?" Because he doesn't think he's smart, but other people can see he's smart if they're smart enough to see it. But anyway, so yeah, those are 3 of my favorites, but there are so many. So now I want to get into some of the mental health stuff and some of the struggles. And a big thing that the show never really outright addresses, in my opinion, I think Dean is an alcoholic. And calling someone an alcoholic, I want to say, because I remember once I did this on Twitter, I said Dean, thought Dean was an alcoholic. And I had another Dean fan say they were very angry that I said that because they felt it was an insult to Dean. And I want to say, I don't think this is an insult to Dean. This is it's a disease and it's part of his struggle. I believe he is. If you don't believe he is, that's fine. This is my own feeling on it. And I think the show shows it, but doesn't outright really say it. But when he's grieving, when he's struggling more, he drinks a lot more even than he normally does. That's how he deals with stuff, is alcohol a lot. So, Paula, what are your thoughts on Dean and alcohol?
I agree. I mean, he is an alcoholic, and I think it's a coping mechanism, but it's also something that he learned from John, because John drank. John was an alcoholic, and this is how we deal with our grief. We don't cry it out. We don't talk it out. We drink it. We drink our feelings. And so I do think he is an alcoholic, and he does struggle with it. And there's even, like, during the Mark of Cain, he did recognize that that was a destructive behavior and tried to curb it because he was trying to um, avoid the effects of the mark, and that was one of the things that he recognized that was um, not helping him, that was destructive. So I don't think it's an insult at all. And I mean, God knows we all love this character, and it wouldn't put him down. It is a struggle, and a lot of people struggle with it. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It's just something that they use as a coping mechanism for whatever, and that very much is something that Dean does. Um, and I blame John a lot for that because, like I said, he learned it from John. John, he wasn't able to express himself in any other way. So what do? You swallow it down, you drink it away, you hide your feelings, you get angry, you hunt things.
Mhm.
And there wasn't really any other avenue for him to deal with those emotions and to deal with the things that he was going through. So, even with Sam trying to always get him to talk about things, somebody, I can't remember where I saw it, somebody made a post about it. It was like, yeah, he always wanted him to talk, but he never really listened. He didn't really let him express himself. And if he did genuinely just come out and try to start talking to Sam about something, Sam would just shut him down because they had other things to deal with. So that was the only thing he had to use. And as unhealthy as it is, that was what he had.
Mhm.
So
And Susie.
Yes, I do agree. Dean is an alcoholic. He's like a functional alcoholic, but he's still an alcoholic. Because he, he did grow up with, and does go to the school of repress your feelings until you die. um, Basically, and unfortunately, most of that he did learn from John, which we could also have a whole separate podcast to talk about my feelings for John and
Mm.
all the ways that I feel that he's just failed as a human being. I do not like that character, and and just the way that he treated both Sam and Dean, especially Dean, just it infuriates me to no end. But yeah, Dean like mostly deals with all his emotions mainly in the fact of like, oh, I'm just not really going to talk about it, and I'm also just going to in a way try to bury them with alcohol, because he it's sort of I see him using it as sort of like a balm to just kind of numb and repress his feelings so that he doesn't really have to deal with or process those complicated emotions. And it's very sad because there are moments we can see when he does kind of a little bit go off the rails and you're like, "Oh my god, Dean, please stop." No, but it's yeah, I mean, he mainly uses it as a coping mechanism, and I just I wish he didn't, but it's what he learned from John, and unfortunately, it seems like that's also something that's heavily ingrained in just hunter culture in general, to just drink to forget and drink to just deal with everything they go through. And it's just very sad that I feel like that's the method that they choose to go with, because some of us have very complicated histories with alcohol, or have family members that we've lost to alcohol. So to see a beloved character kind of go through that, you're like, no, please, this is not the way. It just isn't, and it breaks my heart.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think Dean is definitely an alcoholic, and yeah, it does run in the family, and um, you know, there's a scene in and it's in season 10, and it's in the About a Boy episode, which I also think is a fantastic episode. And when he's sitting at the bar, and I want to say I was so flippin' angry at Sam for this, because Sam goes to look at the guy who's disappeared's apartment, and then Dean, who has at this point, he has told Sam, before that episode, everything that he's trying not to drink as much. He's trying to do this thing of trying to fight the mark. And so he does recognize, like you said, Paula, that the alcohol is something that is not necessarily healthy. I think Dean knows this. He's said before, he's like I don't know what episode, but I know he's used that term of like functional alcoholic before. And he's like there, and then he is sent to go question people in the bar. And yes, Sam does say, well, maybe we'll just switch that. And then Dean's like, no, this is my comfort place. This is home for me. It's a dive bar. And I still wish Sam had kind of, I don't know, seen that hurt there. But like you said, I do think, and we'll be talking about his relationship with Sam here, but shortly. But I do think Sam does want him to open up, but doesn't want him to open up, because anything he says might hurt Sam's feelings. And so Sam doesn't want that, because Sam thinks of Dean as his protector and his guardian and his parent. And so he doesn't want to see him as an equal, honestly. And so I think that was another point when that happened, because Sam really should have been like, no, you know what? I'll go in there with you, because I'm sending you into basically a lion's den in a way. And so you see him go in there, and then he has that line, I'm going to believe in myself. And he gets that shot of whiskey, and he's sitting there looking at it. And, he's hearing stuff, and he feels the mark, and the way he plays that, just looking at that, of like, I should not be doing this. And I know this, but this is the only way I can cope. This is what I've been taught is how you cope. This is the way we cope as hunters. And also, I think Dean has this deep thing of feeling like he has to be a strong man, and a strong man doesn't have alcohol issues. And so a strong man can just drink alcohol. I think that's another part of it too. And so he just drinks it. And it's just to me, there aren't really any words said by Dean in that moment. But of course, once again, Jensen's performance, you see everything there in that struggle. And I think that kind of just shows that. And you see, whenever Dean loses anybody in season 7, he drinks so much in season 7 because he is dealing with the grief over the loss of Cass and then Bobby. And so he is grieving, and how he deals with that is alcohol. You see that in season 13, even more so, in a very deeper level, but you see him dealing with it there. The Mark of Cain, of course, like we've talked about. Season 4, when he comes back from hell. You see even little scenes like the season 10 finale in the very beginning, when he's in that motel room and he picks up that beer and drinks it, and it's just like dripping down his face, and he's sweating, and he looks awful. He still is hot, but he looks awful. And he just is saying, "Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good." And that's kind of what I think Dean repeats to himself sometimes with alcohol. And so, yeah, I think he's definitely is an alcoholic. I don't, it's funny because it's something that I wish the show had explored more, but at the same time, I don't know, with the way the show worked, how much they could have explored with that. I mean, I don't know, they wouldn't have like had him go to AA or anything like that, because they weren't going to give him therapy anyway, so they're not going to give him AA. So I don't know, but I do think it's something that everybody pretty much that watches the show, a lot of people acknowledge it, but I don't know if the show completely acknowledge it in the same way we do as fans. But Jensen's performance acknowledges it all the time. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, and we've talked about this already a little bit, but Dean has a lot of grief and a lot of guilt. This is one of the most guilt-ridden characters ever. He's feels guilt about stuff that is not his fault. Everything is his fault in his brain. So Paula, what are your thoughts about Dean and his dealing with grief and guilt?
Again, I think again, it's a lot of the conditioning that John put on him. That they had a job to do, and if people died, it was their fault. So he really took that to heart. So it was their job to save people, and if somebody died, he failed, and that really just kind of drove his life, because like you said, he literally had the weight of the world on his shoulders. He felt like everybody was his responsibility. And honestly, I think that even started before Mary died, because you saw when they were both in heaven, seeing their ideal heaven, supposedly, you saw Dean, 4-year-old Dean, comforting his mother because her and John had a fight and John was gone. And he's telling her it's going to be okay. So I think it even started before Mary died. It's been an ingrained part of him since probably his earliest memories. And it's just compounded over the years. And it just really colored everything that he did. it would have been really interesting to see a true version of Dean that didn't hunt, just to see how he would have actually turned out, because I see him even not as a hunter in a very nurturing role in society, whether that be, like a firefighter where, he made a comment in season 1 where he wanted to be a firefighter when he was little, whether it be that or, some kind of, I think he always would have been some kind of caretaker. And honestly, I don't think the glimpses that we saw of him as supposedly a normal life, where hunting didn't happen, I don't think those were true um, portrayals of what he would have been like, because I think that was still colored by who he was as a hunter. I think it was his idea of what would have been, because he still had that low self-esteem. Um, but sorry, I lost my train of thought.
It's okay.
um, yeah, everything that Dean did was colored by love for someone else, never love for himself. And so all of those things hit him so much harder than they hit anyone else around him. You know, even Sam, who was with him all the time, when they would lose Cass, Dean was devastated. Yeah, Sam missed him and it was hard for him, but Dean was devastated. When Charlie died, there was probably some guilt from Sam because they were trying to help Dean. And I know Dean blamed Sam partly for that, but he felt like everything that happened was his fault. And that's a horrible way to go through life. And how he was even able to function outside of that is astounding. I mean, despite how crippling that can be, it also shows how strong he was, because he was still able to function.
Mhm. And Susie?
Yeah, Dean carries so much grief and guilt with him constantly. I think, and it's also might just be my biased opinion, but I think more so than any other character in media, because practically his whole life has just been centered around loss. Like even from the moment that he lost his mother and the grief of that, and that grief never being like properly processed and worked through, also because of John, but just because there is no, like, he isn't given any sort of healthy outlet or any like safe space to talk about it. And this is a pattern that repeats itself constantly through his life. And I think one of the moments when you can really tell kind of how much guilt he has is in I forget which episode it was, but it's an episode in season 7 when he's being judged by Osiris. And there's a moment when Joe is brought back and she tries to tell him, like, please, like, don't feel guilty, like, because of your actions. Things are fine. You're fine. And he, like, tells her, I am 90% crap. If I get rid of that, what else is there? Like, what am I going to do? And that is it's very sad. And even Osiris tells Sam, I think, like, oh, I'm not here to just, I'm not out to get people maliciously. People want to be judged and people want to answer to their guilt. And your brother has it and he wants me to judge him. And it just breaks my heart, because Dean does feel guilt for a lot of things. He feels guilt for bringing Sam back into the hunting lifestyle. He feels guilt for breaking the first seal. And every subsequent guilt after that is every time he loses Kaz, for every friend, every found family member that he's lost, even people that are lost during his hunts, he feels all of that very deeply, and he carries it with him through the series and the show run. And it affects him so profoundly, and most of his actions from those losses and that guilt is him trying to kind of in a way like make up for it, or to make it so that people don't really have to like suffer anymore, or people don't have to experience the amount of loss that he has. And it's also very, just very heartbreaking that this is a character who for kind of all his like external bluster, it's just he's a scared little boy with the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he carries that with him every day.
Yeah. Sorry, one second here. Yeah, he if someone were to stub their toe and hurt themselves, he could find a way to feel guilt about that because maybe he left something out that they stubbed their toe on. That's the level of guilt this character carries around. He is so quick to be the sacrificial lamb because he does not feel his life is of any value. He does not see the value in his life except for to care for Sam and save people. But he's saving people because they matter, but he does not ever take a moment to try and save himself. He really hates himself, and it's so sad because there are people that really love him, and he is so filled with love, but he cannot feel that love from other people. Like, he doesn't believe that love. Like, I think, people have called him like a womanizer and all that kind of stuff, but I think there's a big, big reason that Dean does not have those romantic relationships, or has had very few of them. And the real reason is because Dean loses every single person in his life that is close to him. That is the history of this character, is that, and he feels it's his fault that that happens. So if he were to let someone else in his life in that way, in a way of a romantic relationship, of a partnership, that kind of partnership, he doesn't feel he could handle that loss, and he also doesn't want them to be hurt. So he pushes people away so before they can push him away, as far as like romantic entanglements go and stuff like that. Cuz I don't think of Dean, even though they've tried to do this on the show, I don't think of Dean as misogynistic. I don't think of Dean as like a womanizer. I don't think of Dean as like, I think Dean loves women very, very much. You see, he has very close relationships with women. I think one of his closest relationships ever is with Charlie. I think what it is he has this fear that anyone he lets close to him is going to die. And that's because they have. So many people have died or left him or betrayed him or lied to him or abandoned him in some way. His dad was there when he was growing up physically, but his dad was not there. His dad abandoned him. His dad just flat out abandoned him. He abandoned Sam too, but Sam did get little tiny glimpses of being a kid. Dean had to be Dean never got a childhood. Dean was not a child. He's, and you hear him say that later to Mary in season 12. And he wasn't even a child, like you said, Paula, before even hunting became a thing. He was covering for his dad then, and protecting his dad and his mom. And he was 4 flipping years old, and a 4-year-old should not have to do that. That's not their responsibility. But that's just who Dean is. Dean takes on the weight of the world because he feels that's his lot in life. That's his job. That's his duty. That's all he has. And a lot of this is going to go into our last topic with the mental health struggles, but his grief and guilt, I think, are intertwined. And I recently stitched a TikTok, and where I talk about when the original concept of this character, Dean, there has been talk that originally this character was going to have tattoos. And a lot of that was to distinguish him as the quote unquote bad boy. I don't think having tattoos makes you a bad boy, but he's going to have tattoos and piercings and stuff. But the budget and the time that would take, and then also, the other complications that might present with FBI and that kind of stuff, had them scrap that. I wish they had kept that because I think the tattoos especially really fit this character. And I don't mean that as the bad boy part. I just mean it does. And I did a TikTok where I stitched another TikTok where they were talking about that. And this is on our fandom thing account. And I talked about how with Dean's grief and his guilt, it would have been a very interesting storyline to have Dean get a tattoo for every single person he lost as a way to symbolize them. And it wouldn't be their name. It would be, lyrics from a song, maybe something that was an inside joke, some kind of symbol that represented them. And it would have been something that he wouldn't necessarily even explain or tell people he was doing. And it would be his way of honoring them. And I just think that would have been a very interesting way for the show to explore his grief and how he really dealt with that or didn't deal with it. But I think that would have been actually a healthy outlet as opposed to the alcohol with dealing with his grief, because he doesn't really deal with his grief. He just turns it in on himself. And like you were talking about in that episode in season 7, Susie, when he says, I'm 90% crap, that's the way he feels about himself. And it's so heartbreaking because for us that love Dean, we don't see him that way. And you wish he could see himself the way that you see him, kind of thing. And I always will wish the show sometimes could see him that way too, because I think sometimes the show forgot who he was too. And that's why I will always be grateful for episode 15, 18 for the simple fact, even though Dean, of course, didn't take it in because, of course, it's followed right up with him losing Cass again. But I will always appreciate that episode for one simple thing of the fact that he finally gets to hear from someone who he really is. And he had never heard that from anyone, not even from Sam. I'm sorry, but he didn't hear that from Sam. He definitely didn't hear it from John, didn't hear it from Mary. Nobody really ever said truly who Dean was until Cass did in that moment. And then, of course, Dean didn't take that in because it's followed immediately with him losing Cass again. So, and this time really permanently. And so it's like, it just breaks my heart that this is a person that also in the very end was okay with dying because Sam got to go and live a normal life. And it's just like, to me, that was like the ultimate FU to this character. It really pisses me off because it's like, basically you're saying, yep, what you felt about yourself, Dean, this is accurate. It's true. So we're going to kill you and we're going to let Sam live this life with his blurry wife and bad wig and whatever, whatever he ended up doing for a career. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Well, now I want to move on to something that I think is very deeply tied into this. And I think Dean struggles a lot with being suicidal and suicidal ideation. And it's not really touched on too much in the show, I don't think, except for through the performance and some of the writing. But what do you think about that aspect of his character?
Yeah, I think it's very deeply tied to his guilt and his self-loathing. He doesn't think he's worth the same as everyone else. Like, he will give his life for anybody if it means they'll be safe. It doesn't matter who it is. Yes, we saw it first with Sam, but he has no qualms about dying if it means saving someone else. Because he doesn't feel that he is worth anything. And it's so hard to see that because he has a lot of worth, not just because he's a hunter and he's saving people, because he does. He he literally has saved the world how many times? I mean, I don't know, I've lost count. There's so many times that that's happened, but just on an individual basis, um he's shown so much compassion for people, but he doesn't see that in himself. And so, it's nothing for him to charge in and not give a thought to if he's going to survive it or not, because he doesn't think he doesn't think he deserves to. As I think a big thing. He doesn't think he deserves to live if somebody else dies. And that's um it's heartbreaking and it's frustrating, and nobody should feel like that. But again, it goes back, I think, a lot to John, where so much focus was put on watch out for Sammy. Well, who was watching out for Dean? Nobody, except for the handful of times he was with Bobby, and even that got taken away from him. Um, so he had no reason to think that he was worth anything, which is just horrible. Nobody should feel like that ever. Everyone is worth something. But trying to convince him of that, and nobody really did until Cass, I think. I mean, yeah, Sam was angry when Dean made that demon deal to bring him back, but other than that, and Bobby was angry with him, but he still didn't see that self-worth, and I don't think he really saw it until Cass made that confession and told him how much who Dean was changed him. So
Susie.
Yeah, most of Dean's, I completely agree with what Paula has mentioned, that most of his suicidal ideation and kind of is just very deeply enmeshed with the grief and guilt that he feels, where he's like a stone on a shore. He's just constantly battered by all these different waves of things, and for him, his solution to that, or the frame of thinking that he has, is, oh, if I just go under, that's going to be the best for everyone. Like, that's what's going to help everyone the most. If we've got a big bad to deal with, that's fine. I can die. As long as everyone else is okay, I don't matter. As long as Sammy's fine, I'm cool. And it's very much like, no, there's other solutions, Dean. It doesn't always have to be you the one who has to give up everything all the time. And it is him constantly also having with him just, and there's also the fact that he has a very low opinion of himself, and kind of also at times very low self-esteem, where if it comes to a point where it's either him or Sam, he'll sacrifice himself, and he'll be the one to take that fall. And whenever Sammy does something similar, he gets so mad because he doesn't see the reason why. He doesn't see himself as worth saving, as worth sacrificing for. And that is just, and again, it's just very heartbreaking, because even if he thinks like that, even if anyone else thinks like that, that's not true. We all have boundless and endless amounts of worth, that even if at times we don't see it, it's there. And it's just, and I really wish that the show kind of like gave Dean a chance to see that and kind of realize it, instead of kind of treating him the way he did, because it's also one of the reasons why the ending to the show infuriates me to no end, because I feel like that was such a disservice to Dean's character. And I feel like the ending to the show and the ending to his like character could have been handled like leagues better than how it was, because Dean deserved better than that, and he's worth more than that.
Yeah. This is a point that I get so angry with the show and some of the other characters when it comes to this side of Dean, because I think, you saw his suicidal ideation, and I think a lot of where that comes from is, like I said, he makes himself the sacrificial lamb right away. I mean, he sold his soul for Sam without really even thinking about that, because to him, in his mind, his soul is not worth the paper it's written in, kind of thing. He doesn't value himself enough. And I think a big part of one of the biggest episodes, one of the biggest points in this show where you first really see his suicidal stuff and the way he's treated for it is, to me, I cannot watch this episode very much. I've watched it maybe a couple times. I usually will skip it, or I'll try not to watch it. And I know a lot of people love this episode for a certain scene, and that's Point of No Return in season 5. To me, Dean is so suicidal in that episode. Him being willing to say yes to Michael and Michael possessing his vessel is not about him trying to save the day. It's not about him having a hero complex. It's not about him being stupid or selfish or whatever. He did that because he is like, it doesn't matter. I don't matter. So I might as well take on this vessel, and maybe I can, or take on, have this angel possess me and use me, because I don't matter at all. And nothing I do is going to change anything. So I'm just going to do this, and maybe I can kill Lucifer before Lucifer has a chance to get inside my brother, or use my brother as this vessel. Maybe I can do that. But he doesn't think of it as this thing. I think people really overlook the fact that Dean is so suicidal in that episode. And what do the people that supposedly love Dean more than anything do to him? You have Sam and Bobby lock him away in a way and talk to him like he's a piece of trash. I love Bobby, but Bobby has talked to Dean like this a couple times. Towards the end of season 4, the whole thing that I know people like this scene. I do not like this scene where he tells Dean basically, the boohoo princess line. I think is kind of BS. Honestly, I think it's really kind of mean to say that whole scene, I think, is mean, because Sam was really horrible to Dean, and I don't know, it felt like that got kind of brushed aside. But in this one, you have both Sam and Bobby don't seem to really see how hurt and lost he is, and that he's like suicidal. They don't seem to see that. And yes, I understand Cass is an angel and he doesn't know human stuff. I understand that. But then you have a scene where Cass nearly kills him because Cass is angry at him, but Dean is suicidal. And I understand Cass doesn't understand human emotions, doesn't understand the suicide thing. But the reason that scene pisses me off is then, and I understand shipping Destiel. I know I have Destiel shippers on my panel with me. I'm not putting the ship down at all. I want to stress that. But the way that scene has been romanticized will always bother me, because Dean was suicidal. I read a fic, and there was no real, I didn't know this was even going to happen, where basically that scene was followed up with a sex scene that basically was non-consensual, in my opinion. And I find that with Dean, and I think that episode kind of encapsulates it, Dean is treated as only worthy because of the relationships he has and what he can give other people. And I think some people that watch the show look at him that way. I think some shippers look at him that way. I think, and I'm talking from all ships, and I think the show looks at him that way sometimes, where his worth is what he can do for Sam, how many times he can save Sam. The whole finale, the series finale, that was all about Sam. That was all about saving Sam, giving Sam what he deserved, which was a happy life, because Dean's only purpose was, in the end, to be the caretaker, and we don't care about anything else for him. And in Point of No Return, that's who he feels he is. And it felt to me like nobody that was supposed to care about him gave a shit about it, and it really just broke my heart. And then you also see that a lot in the Advanced Theology episode, which is the episode right before Tombstone. And he has that conversation with Billy, and he basically is just ready to die. And he does that all the time. I mean, he takes that stuff to stop his heart because he's ready to die. In Red Meat, he kills himself because he wants to bring Sam back. And he realizes he might not be able to be brought back, but he doesn't care because his life doesn't mean anything. And it will always be my biggest sticking point in this show, is the fact that nobody else in the show, at least very rarely does it ever seem to be acknowledged, that this is a very suicidal character, and he's so suicidal, and he's that ideation there, and the times when he's been in that place and he has been treated like crap by the people that's supposed to love him, that are supposed to love him. It's just it hurts my heart. It really hurts my heart. It makes me very sad, because I feel like nobody treated Dean with the care and love that he deserved. And I'm not saying Dean didn't make mistakes. And when I'm talking about that scene with Cass, I want to also stress, when Dean has beat up Cass, I'm not for that either. I don't think that's romantic. I don't think anything about that's romantic. And I'm not in favor of that, but I see the times when it's been the opposite seem to be more romanticized to me. And it seems the same way with like Sam and a lot of characters. It's like, it's okay to treat Dean like crap, but if Dean does anything like that, or Dean sticks up for himself, or Dean has any moment of being completely and totally honest, because he's has a moment of being like, okay, I'm going to try not to worry how this will affect everybody else. He's shunned or treated like crap or beat up or locked away or ignored, or the subject's changed, or, that kind of stuff. So it's, so this is a very big thing that uh, it makes me very sad. So anyway, I'm going to stop now before I go, because we could do a whole episode on this, but before I really anger all of the other fans of other characters on this show, because and I love Cass. I do. We're going to talk about Cass in a little bit here. But I just, that scene, that whole episode is okay. So we're going to talk about Dean's relationships, and yes, we are going to single out some, and I know there are tons of relationships, but we're going to, of course, you can't talk about Dean you have to talk about Sam, because this very codependent relationship. So what are your thoughts about Dean and Sam's relationship?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of codependency there. And again, we can blame that all on John. There's a lot of things we can blame on John for starting. I think their relationship is definitely much more, almost more of a parent-child relationship than a sibling relationship in a lot of ways. I mean, yes, they still have that, uh, brotherly banter and, giving each other a hard time and pranking each other and things like that. There's still a lot of that, but Dean, I think, views Sam more of as a child than a brother, because of the role that he was forced into of being his caretaker. And I think that was a lot of reason why it was so hard for him to let go when Sam left to go to college, and why he has so much guilt over pulling Sam back into hunting, and a lot of the things that happened to Sam is because, as the parent, he's responsible for Sam. And so if bad things happen to him, then it must be his fault, which again goes back into all that guilt and self-loathing, and it's all tied together so much. Um, and again, somebody on Twitter brought up an interesting point of how they see each other. Um, and they used what was it, after school special, where you see things more from Sam's point of view, when you see them both in high school, and Dean's kind of playing around with the girls, and he's going out with one girl, and then he gets caught kissing another girl in the janitor's closet, and those kinds of things. And you see a side of Dean from Sam's perspective, where he's a little bit more immature and kind of that bad boy persona that he's trying to portray. But then in Bad Boys, where he's at Sunny's, you see Dean looking at Sam, and Sam's like 12 years old, but when you actually physically see him at the end of the episode, he looks much younger than 12. He looks like he's probably about 7 or 8. And so you see those different perspectives. And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at those two episodes, and how they see each other. Um, and so, I think to Sam, Dean is still an older brother, but yes, he's a caretaker because, he's been kind of forced in that, but he's still kind of that annoying older brother. And he just wants to get away from that and not have that caretaker role be forced on him, or have, saying that wrong, have Dean, be that parent to him anymore as they grow up. And Dean has a hard time letting that go. Um, and and how you see them from each other's perspective is very different, I think, than how the audience sees them, which is a very interesting dynamic. And I think those two episodes really do kind of highlight that difference of perspective, which is very interesting. But um, and I'm sorry, but I have a lot of issues with Sam in regards to how he treats Dean. And it's not just Sam. A lot of characters, like we've said before, they don't see Dean as being intelligent or um, capable in a lot of respects. And I think that's because he hides that. I almost think it's almost kind of like an armor of, well, if they don't expect it of me, then when I don't give that to them, then they're not going to be disappointed. So let them think I'm dumb. Let them think I'm shallow, misogynistic womanizer, where you see glimpses of him being exactly the opposite. Um, and that, I don't know, that dynamic between Sam and Dean is very complicated sometimes, and very frustrating. Seeing Sam sometimes putting Dean down for things that are absolutely not true. Like we said, it'll be like Sam will say something, Dean will make a comment from a quote from a book, and Sam will just look at him like, where the hell did that come from? Just because he's a high school dropout doesn't mean that he doesn't have the intelligence. Like you said, he got a GED, and I didn't even think about it from that perspective. Why would he get a GED? He didn't
Yeah.
need to. I never thought of that before. That's absolutely right. But he comes back with, well, I read. Well, of course I read. you know. So I think a lot of people's opinions of him are much less than what Dean really is, and that's sad to see and unfortunate. And I don't think anybody ever really gave him the credit that he deserved, to be honest. Sam just as much as anybody else. And I don't particularly hate that character, but if Dean hadn't been around and it was just all about Sam, I'm sorry, I couldn't have stuck with the show. It's just, I think he comes across sometimes as very selfish and egotistical. and he's very much a know-it-all. Well, he has a college education, so obviously he must be smarter. And that's not always the case. Just because you have the book smarts doesn't mean you have the street smarts or the real knowledge. That comes from life experience. And I honestly think that Dean had a lot more of that than Sam did in some respects, just because of the way they grew up and because of how much that Dean sheltered Sam. And Sam, I don't think, ever really realized all of what Dean went through in their childhood. I think he got little glimpses of it here and there, but he never understood the full picture of all of the things that Dean went through when they were growing up, because Dean didn't let that happen. He hid all of that. So nobody really understood the pain and the self-loathing that Dean really had, except for maybe Cass. And that was because, he literally put him back together piece by piece. And so he saw all those things that Dean was. And I don't think anybody else really did to any extent. But
Yeah. Susie.
I can't figure out how to unmute myself. Sam is Dean's brother. He's the little brother. Listen, I'm gonna agree with everyone else on this panel, and I'm so glad that we're all in agreement that we do not like Sam Winchester. He's not one of my favorites, and one thing that I could never understand, not never, just something that I have a really hard time understanding is how, when presented between these two brothers, would you pick Samuel Winchester? Not to be like, this is not a dig. It's something that I just have a genuinely hard time coming to terms with. Is why Sam? Because like Sam is Dean's younger brother, and one thing that it makes me so sad, and so it further adds to the reasons why I'm very upset at John, and if I were ever to meet him, I would throw hands, is that from the moment that Mary dies, all issues of like being the most functional adult in the house, not just being a parent that's present, not just being charged with to raise his little brother, it's just being the most functional adult in the Winchester household, falls upon Dean, because John is just off gallivanting who knows where, killing monsters, and it's just Dean, a child, a literal like first grader, is in charge of a baby, and of having to take care of this baby and raise him, because if he doesn't, who else will? And if he doesn't raise him and take care of him, then he's going to lose him, just like how he lost his mom. And if he does lose him, then all of that like guilt is of losing a little brother. That's going to be another like pile of things to carry on top of the stuff that he already does. And so throughout the whole series, and he cares a lot for Sammy, and he tries time and time again to make sure that he will have the best chance at life and the best chance at a most seemingly normal childhood that a hunter's kid can have. And he tries time and time again to give him the best chance of survival. And one thing that irks me to no end about Sam is that it doesn't feel like that same kindness or empathy is returned to Dean most of the time, because and this might just be from my point of view, but like in the moments when Dean goes off with like Lisa and Ben to kind of even have like a taste of what a normal life would be like, whenever Sam comes to get him, it seems like he's almost like resentful of him for even wanting a normal life, even though when Sam tried to do the same thing, Dean, I don't feel like necessarily maligned him for it. He was hurt that, yeah, he wanted to just kind of forget about his past, but in a way I feel like he understood in some ways more than Sam did him. And it feels like time and time again, Dean has proven how much he cares for Sam and how much he'd be willing to sacrifice for him, and like how much he cares, and it doesn't feel like Sam even returns that half the time, or it just kind of feels like he looks at Dean like he's his like beer drinking, hamburger eating, porn watching older brother, and it's very frustrating, and I don't feel like I'm being very like, what's the word, succinct with my thoughts, because whenever I think about Sam's treatment of Dean, I just get into like a tizzy, and I feel like I can't like verbalize things like well enough to kind of express my feelings about this character. And it just feels like Dean cares for Sam with like both his heart and soul and whole being. And from Sam's end, it just feels like he just cares for him from his heart, but not much else beyond that, if that makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense.
Which is another reason why I find Sam very yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. This is where my warning comes in for Sam girls out there, because I know there are people who love this character. I understand. There are moments that I do love this character. I want to say, as much as I struggle with this character, there are moments when I have loved Sam. And I know a lot of people say, well, if you love Dean so much, there's no way you can not like Sam, because Dean, his whole being is wrapped up in Sam and being Sam's caretaker and his mom and his dad and his brother, all three things wrapped up into one. But the reason I have issues with Sam is because I love Dean so much. That's the reason I have issues with Sam, because Sam, people love to say Sam is such a sweetheart, and he's the nicer of the two brothers, and he's more compassionate, he's more caring. I honestly think with Sam, that is Sam's shield. That's what Sam shows the world, but that's not really who Sam is. And I honestly think, and this may be superficial, but I also read something about this a long time ago, but I think the way you can tell who these two are is in sex scenes. When you watch sex scenes in the show, you watch Sam's sex scenes. Sam's sex scenes are very much about control and power, and he's a lot more dominant in those sex scenes. And Dean's sex scenes are about Dean being softer, and you'll see a lot of times with Dean's sex scenes, he and yes, this is very, I understand that this is a very superficial way that sometimes people look at sex and the role of, people who identify as female, people who identify as male, and their roles, the gender dynamics in sex and how that kind of stuff. I understand that, but I think the way it's portrayed, where most of the time when you see Dean have sex, the woman is usually on top towards the end. The woman is usually taking control. And I always find that very interesting with his sex scenes, because it's like, this is a person who on the surface, the way people like to look at him is he's this womanizer, and he's like, doesn't really have any value in women. But when you watch his sex scenes are all about the woman finding pleasure. Honestly, that is what the sex scenes are about. Watch them. Go just watch those sex scenes. Watch when he has sex with the Amazon woman, and which leads to Emma. Watch that. And then the scene with Anna when he has sex with her in the back of the Impala. That sex scene. Even when he has sex with the porn star, what is so fascinating about that's how you could tell the difference between him and the demon, is I honestly think Dean has complete and utter respect for porn stars, strippers, sex workers. He has complete utter respect for them. And in that scene, he is so completely dumbfounded that this woman would want to have sex with him, and then he gets on board with it. But he's like this Twitter pated guy, because this is someone that he has probably had a lot of fun times alone with, watching her movies, but he never thought she would be interested in him, because I don't think he honestly, I know he knows he's attractive, but I don't think he sees how absolutely gorgeous he is. And that scene is also, even though he does pick her up and she wraps her legs around him, there's still this part of that is about her pleasure. Whereas with Sam's sex scenes, they're very different than that. Honestly, go watch their sex scenes. If you watch them like together, and I'm not just talking about soulless Sam sex scenes, I'm talking about the Ruby sex scenes. I'm talking about any sex scene with Sam is a lot different. And I honestly think you can see the characters in those scenes and who they really are. Because I think Sam is very selfish, self-absorbed, very egotistical. He's a snob. And that's why he doesn't think Dean is smart, because he went to college and he was going to become a lawyer, because so that's a smart thing to do. And his brother only likes porn, even though his brother has said on numerous occasions that he reads. His brother read Kurt Vonnegut, which is not like easy passive reading, all this kind of stuff. So to me, it's like, I'm not really going into their relationship very much. Sorry, I got so on the sex stuff side of it. But I've always found the sex scenes so flippin' interesting to watch. I know there aren't very many of them, but because it's such a different dynamic, with those sex scenes. And that's probably why, honestly, a lot of times in fic, when it is male relationship, 9 times out of 10, and sometimes there'll be switches, but a lot of times Dean is written as being a bottom, and then the other person is a top. Honestly, I think that comes from some of the stuff that they've seen on there. But anyway, I know that there are different dynamics to that, but I just have always found it interesting to watch those sex scenes when you're really watching and seeing the character there, and how Dean really in those scenes is a lot about the woman's pleasure, and Sam always seems more about himself. And I think that's the way Sam is in real life. And I think a lot of that, honestly, is because he was treated like that from a young kid. He got to be a child longer than Dean did, and he had a brother who, in Something Wicked This Way comes when Dean like gives up the cereal for Sam to have it, which I'm not blaming Sam for this. Sam was a little kid, but gives up the cereal. And then he throws out the SpaghettiOs that always, I'm like, why'd you throw out the SpaghettiOs? You still could have ate the SpaghettiOs. But anyway, I feel like I'm just rambling here. But I think Sam takes advantage of Dean a lot, and takes advantage of that love and that never ending love. And you see that in season 8 with Benny, and how he cannot handle Dean having another friendship where he might actually like someone and want to spend time with someone other than him. He cannot stand that. He cannot handle that. And the whole thing with Sam not looking for Dean when Dean was in purgatory, and then people always compare it to season 6 when Sam went to hell and Dean not looking for Sam. Dean specifically said that he actually secretly was always trying to find Sam. So let's get that out there, because people always say that didn't happen. That is not true. Dean still looked for Sam. Sam did not look for Dean, but Dean still looked for Sam. And Sam didn't, because Sam inside is still that little boy who can't grow up and can't be independent because he has to rely on his brother to save his ass all the time. And yeah, sorry, that was a lot of rambling. I apologize. And I focused so much on the sex stuff, but I really just think it's interesting to watch. I don't know if my panelists agree about that's the sex scenes, but I've always found them very fascinating to compare. So maybe we'll do a whole episode on that. That's probably why I enjoy watching the Dean sex scenes more than I enjoy watching the Sam sex scenes. But that's also just because, it's Dean. Okay, well, now we're going to talk about John and Mary Winchester, his dad and his mom. We just love these two. I'm sorry.
So much. So much. Like, and I know a lot of people like Mary, and when she came back, I at first thought, this is going to be interesting. And then I realized that I don't like Mary very much either. I mean, she wasn't abusive to Dean the way John was, but there was still a lot of issues with her and how she treated them when she came back. She was constantly running away and trying to abandon them, which just pissed me off. And again, I have my own mother issues, so that probably colored my view of her. But and I said it before, I think a lot of Dean's issues stemmed from even before John got into hunting. Um, I don't think if Mary had not died in that fire that things would have been great for Dean anyway, because they showed that even though she said she wanted to get away from hunting, she was still hunting even after Dean was born. I think even after Sam was born, I think she may have still gone on a hunt. I know at least after Dean was born, she was still hunting. So I think yeah, I have a lot of issues with both of them, and how they treated Dean and how they saw Dean. Um, you know, yes, when Mary came back, they were both adults, um, and they were strangers to her, and I understand that, and I can see, how that added a dynamic to their relationship. But having her literally just walk away from them and um team up with the British men and letters who had literally tortured Sam and Dean to some extent. I mean, I'm sorry, but if I was a mother, I'd be burning down everything that those people had touched, because no. But she went behind their backs and was working with these people that had literally hurt her children. That, I'm sorry, is unforgivable. I can never forgive that. And Dean had such an idolized vision of his mother in his head that he was seeing things from his memories of a 4-year-old, and even those we know were skewed because they kind of portrayed this relationship between Mary and John as being kind of this idyllic you know relationship, and then you started to see, no, it wasn't like that. Like the angels had to almost force them together, and John and Mary were fighting all the time, and Dean was having to comfort his mother and telling her it's okay, and kind of cleaning up John's messes even from the time that he was a toddler, for God's sake. He just had everything stacked against him from the very beginning, and I'm glad that he got the chance in the episode with Mary to lay out all of those feelings that he had of, he literally said, I hate you, but I love you. How can I, how can he not? Because, you're my mom. And then in Lebanon, he got to kind of have a little bit of that closure with John too, where, John's like, well, I always thought you'd have, go move on from hunting and have a family. He's like, I do have a family. so he was able to have some of those conversations with his parents, but neither one of them were great people. And poor Dean just never had a chance. I mean, seriously. The only one that really was a good parent to him was Bobby. And even then, yeah, there was issues there too. But I don't know. Yeah, and I think the relationship with both parents kind of fed into those self-esteem issues that he had. It's very hard when a parent walks out on you to not feel like some of that blame is on yourself. And I can definitely empathize with that so much. Um, and I'm glad that he had Bobby at least in his life to be more of a caring parent figure than either of the other two were, to be honest. I mean, Mary was when he was a child, and I know they repaired their relationship later on, and I'm glad for that. But I still had such a hard time when I would see her on screen. And Samantha Smith is a fantastic actress. She did such a wonderful job, and I don't hate the actress at all. But I had a hard time with Mary when she came back because of how she treated Dean, and he did not deserve that at all. A lot of the way people treated him, he did not deserve. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So, Susie, I know you're here to defend John and Mary. I'm just kidding. Okay, Susie, your thoughts. Okay, because your screen was frozen. Okay, go ahead.
I can't even unmute myself to to spout my words and my thoughts and feelings. Yeah, I think out of everyone in the series, John and Mary are like the most wonderful parents. 10 out of 10. They're absolutely fabulous. There's nothing wrong with them at all. They're anyone who says, "Did you watch the same show?" No, they are perfect. They're paragons of parenthood. They are like the Brady Bunch, but like with less kids. Just astounding, fabulous. Listen, I could go on and on about my disdain for Jonathan Winchester. I was trying to think of a middle name for him, but I'm so incensed by this man that I can't think of a Jonathan Chad Winchester. I hate him. I hate him so much. But I was very before Mary ever came back, I was very kind of like apathetic to her almost. Like my thought process about her was, oh, she's nice as an idea, as like this is someone that has passed. We'll do things in her memory and avenge her and da da da. But after they brought her back, oh boy, she was there for a second, and then she wasn't. It's like she went off into the ceiling again. But just like her her treatment of Dean and both the brothers after she came back, to me, was very reminiscent of kind of almost the mothers that trope of mothers who have kids too young, and as a result they go off to party and kind of do whatever, and as a consequence of that are very absent in their children's lives and kind of don't really know what's going on until they pop up occasionally like, hey, how's it going? Oh, you've been doing this? Oh, I've been sleeping with the guy who tortured you. And yeah, how's that? And it's like, oh my god, Mary, Mary, out of all the decisions that could have been made, these are not the right ones. I don't know who what led down this train of thought, but no. It's to me her return was just very very disappointing because I like I love Samantha Smith. Again, I reiterate what Paula said. I think she's a very like talented, fabulous actress. But I could have done without having Mary come back and be present in the boys' lives. Because to me, she didn't just add anything more to the show other than more like, Jesus Christ, Dean can never catch a break from terrible parents. Like he can know no peace. Because like from the get, we see that Dean highly values John's opinion of him, where he just like keeps trying time and time again to kind of like almost live up to his unattainable expectations of him. And so then when he falls short of those expectations, he takes it very personally and it hurts him very much. And even just also the way that John treats him when he does like fail or make mistakes, it's very much like, oh no, you're supposed to be this like perfect child, this perfect hunter that I've raised. And because you're not, like, you're supposed to be perfect, you're supposed to be perfect at hunting, be perfect at raising Sammy, be perfect at doing this and this. And when you're not, you're just a deep disappointment that I don't think I can ever just overcome. And it's very much like, I don't care what age he is still your child. You are like supposed to not just add to his pain. What it's Jonathan. But I also one of his faults at times is that he cares so much and he loves so much, which is when people like hurt him, it hurts 10 times as worse for him. And that is just like I understand that sometimes the people that we love hurt us, but Dean shouldn't be hurt at the level and regularity that he is hurt in the show by people that he loves and trusts, like his father. And just, if I could give Dean a new family, I would. Because he just deserves so much better than the hand the fates dealt him, I feel.
Yep. Not I won't add too much more because I ditto everything that was said. And I've been abandoned by a father not once but twice, the same dad 2 times in my life. And it is something, the second time I was an adult, I was like 20, 22. And so I was, an adult, but it still hurt and you do blame yourself. It's the psychology of it. And so I relate to Dean a lot with the dad issues, and John is reminds me a lot of my dad. So that even makes it more relatable. And so John is abusive, mentally abusive, a very, very mentally abusive parent. and he took out his grief and his anger about the loss of Mary. He took that out on Dean more than Sam, much more than Sam, because Sam actually, you know, and Sam would stand up to John a lot, and I think that was because he had that younger thing, I think, and also because I think he felt like he could, because he was safe to, because he had somebody else to back him up, which was Dean. Even though Dean did stand up for his dad, but he still had Dean there to be his parent. So if he lost John, he would still have Dean. So I think that as well. And with Mary, when season 11 ended and Mary was brought back, and you know, Amara gave Dean Mary, I was actually very excited. I was very excited for this storyline that lasted till like the third episode, and then all that excitement vanished. And I understand, because I've gotten into many discussions about that. I understand this is a character Mary she doesn't know her adult children. She died. She's been living in heaven with her kids, who are kids who are, you know, little children. I get that. I understand that would be hard. It's the way she left that bothers me. It's not that she left, it's the way she left. If she had left and been like, I'm going to go, and it's not you, but she told them it was them. She basically said, it's you. I can't stand being around you. I mean, I know she didn't say I can't stand, but she basically was saying it because of you that I'm leaving. And if she would have, it would have been much more interesting to watch her explore, like reading John's journal and realizing how abusive John was to her kids, and then dealing with that anger towards her husband that she loved so much, and even though they fought, she didn't know this side of John really. And the disappointment that her kids ended up in a life she didn't want her kids in. That kind of thing would have been much more interesting to watch than to watch her continually abandon her children. And every time she was around them, she acted like she couldn't stand them, like they were obnoxious, annoying. She didn't want to be around them. And it was so hard to watch that. And then, of course, to watch her work with the British men of letters that you saw in the very beginning, torturing Sam, and they hurt Dean too, but I do think that was more the torturing Sam was like the part that I'm like, they tortured your son and you're just going to go work with them. And there seemed to be no really, even though she lied about it. So of course she felt some guilt about it, but at the same time, she seemed to do that. She always seemed to choose other people over them. And she always seemed to want to be around other people more and had more respect for them and more love and admiration for them. I mean, you saw that in season 13 when she is in the alternate universe and Jack is over there, and she has these moments with Jack that are moments that you wish she could have had with her sons, where she shows this parental love to Jack that you don't ever see her really show to her sons. That being said, I think the show killing Mary again was absolutely atrocious. It was so awful to do that. I think that was awful. And I don't like Mary, but I still think that was horrible to bring her back and then kill her like they did in season 14. So anyway, but yeah, I'm not a fan of either of these characters. And I used to like Mary, and I used to think that Dean was more like Mary. And then I'm like, no, Dean is not like either of his parents. He's not like either of them. So yeah. And I wrote down that Jonathan Chad Winchester, because I'm gonna have to tell everybody that is John's name from now on. This is amazing, Susie. Okay, well, we're gonna move on now to the angel that rescued Dean from hell and came on board in season 4. And this was a character that was supposed to die in season 4, but of course stayed with the series because of how many people loved him, and that is Cass. And I'm going to have Paula and then Susie say their thoughts, because I have to go and feed a dog, Fergie, who will be very upset with me if I don't go, because she eats dinner around this time. And if I don't go feed her, take her outside to go to the bathroom, you're going to start, she's going to turn into a hellhound, and she's going to
Well, we can't have that.
Yes. So Paula,
Should have bust down that door.
Paula, take it away with your thoughts about Cass. And then once Paula's done, Susie, you can take it away, and then I'll be back in shortly here.
All right. Well, Cass. I think out of all of the characters that Dean interacts with on the show, I think Cass is the one that not just understands, but maybe accepts him the most. Um, and I think that's because Cass is the one that actually saw Dean in hell and saw what he had become in hell. And even though when we first see Cass, he doesn't understand human emotion and he doesn't understand humanity much. He learns everything through the lens of Dean, basically. And he accepts Dean for who he is, despite all of those horrible things he did in hell, all of the things that he does later in life. Because I mean, as much as we love Dean, Dean's not perfect. He's made mistakes, he's done bad things, he's he's hurt people, but Cass cares about him despite all of that, and loves him and cares about him for who he is as a person. I think honestly, Cass, even more than Sam, just loves Dean for who he is. Um, and I think that, and accepts him. And I think that's part of why each time Cass died, that loss was so devastating to Dean, because he knew no matter what, you know, Cass would accept him, even though he's still, like everybody else in his life, would leave, he always came back. And I think there was a lot of issue for Dean with everybody in his life of being abandoned. Um, and I think that's part of why he just kind of held on to everybody in his life so much, because he was afraid of being left alone. And he ha- I think that's one of the beautiful things about Dean was, you had this angel, this being who was created not to have free will, to just follow orders, to do what he was told, to, you know, do, like I said, do whatever he was told. But because he met Dean, and Dean had such a powerful influence on him, because they had that bond, he learned to be, um, he learned how to be a person, really. He learned free will, he learned how to love. He even said it at the very end. He learned how to love humanity, he learned how to care for people because of Dean. Dean taught him those things. Dean is such a caring person that he fundamentally changed who Castiel was. And that's just, I think he had that influence on a lot of people, but Cass was the one that you saw that the most, because of who he was when he pulled Dean out of hell, and who he was at the very end when he sacrificed himself to save Dean. And I don't know, it was really cool to see that transformation of Cass over the course of the show, to see how he came into who he is as a person, and how much influence Dean had on that. And that was a good thing. Dean had a good influence on Cass, I think. So, what do you think?
Oh yes, I muted successfully. I unmuted successfully.
Yay!
Oh, drink that technology. Um, I I really like the relationship between Dean and Kaz. It's by far one of my most favorite ones on the show, like shipping aside, because we do see that like even from the moment that Kaz brings out Dean from hell, it's just that that he saw something in him and saw something in him that was worth like saving and bringing out, and he brings him out, and he has a very, very like a detached view of humanity. But as that season goes on, and as we get into the subsequent season, we see that as the more and more time they spend together, the more Castiel learns about humanity, and the more he comes to kind of believe in and have faith in what the brothers are doing and how he wants to kind of help them. And we even see how much like Dean also deeply cares for Kaz as well, like especially in, I think it's season 7, after, is it 7, after Castiel like has the Leviathans and kind of dies in the lake. Even like the aftermath of that, we see that Dean just carries around his trench coat, because that was his friend. That was someone that he trusted and cared deeply about, which for Dean is kind of saying a lot, because sometimes and most times he has a very hard time letting people in, but he kind of opened himself up to Kaz and opened himself up to that kind of friendship slash partnership. And so when he loses him, it's something that's very hard for him, and part of his way of just kind of like processing that grief and remembering him is to carry around his trench coat. And so when he does come back later, like he gives it back to him. And this trench coat, may I tell you, was clean. Like there was no lake water on it. Like you just know he visited a dry cleaner or something and had that like nice and pressed and ready. Like, I got to keep this looking nice, because Castiel would have wanted it to be nice. And like even throughout the whole series, we see this like time and time again, just the amount of trust and faith that they have in each other as like friends, as partners, and like fellow hunter buddies. And just like those bonds and that kind of ineffable love, like romantic or otherwise, is something that's like very, very sweet to see. And it's very nice to know that Dean has someone like that in his life that like does care for him at close to the levels that he deserves, which I just really appreciate about that.
Yeah. I can't wait to listen back when I'm editing and hear what everybody had to actually say about Cass. I only got the last there. Excuse me. I do really love, one second here. Sorry, I have to tell. Sorry, had to answer a text there. Sorry about that. But I do love Cass. I do think there were times when the show didn't exactly know what to do with Cass, and I wish they had just made him become a hunter and stop with the angel business. Only because I thought that got boring. But anyway, putting that aside, I especially when I've been binging it, the friendship that Dean has with Cass, see, like Dean has never really had this. I don't think he's never really had a friend. I think like Charlie becomes friend, stuff like that. But I think his whole life has been so wrapped up in being Sam's everything, really. His caretaker and his mom and his dad and his brother, that he didn't give himself time to really have a friend. And I think Cass was the first person that became his friend. And there are supposed rumors out there that there were some times when Jared Padalecki, who plays Sam, of course, there was talk that he might have been leaving the show And so they were trying to test out having the show then be just Dean and Cass. And so you'd see like episodes where it would be, you know, Dean and Cass doing stuff. I don't know how true this is. This is just a rumor. But when you watch those episodes, like when you watch Free to Be You and Me in season 5 is one of my favorite episodes, because you watch, it's the first time you really see like Dean and Cass having like this friendship buddy comedy almost kind of moments there. And Dean having fun with Cass and laughing with Cass, and him even saying, I haven't laughed that much in years, and him realizing that. And having this thing where, you know, I think even though sometimes I struggled with Cass, I will be honest, I love Cass, I do, but there are times when I did struggle with him, and that's mainly because of the writing. But what I loved about their relationship is I think it was very much on equal footing. So it never felt, whereas with Sam and Dean, it's not equal footing. They're not equals. They just are not equals. They are not written as equals. They are not treated as equals. And I think with Cass and Dean, they're very much equals. And Cass treats Dean as an equal, and Cass treats Dean as and I'm talking about the Cass that ends up growing past the soldier, because Cass was like a good little soldier, kind of like Dean was a good little soldier kind of thing. And Cass grows beyond that because of Dean, and because Dean has faith in Cass even before I think Dean knows that he has faith in Cass. And I think because of Dean's faith in Cass, and because of Dean pushing Cass grows as a human being. I mean, Cass ends up saying this in 1518, that because of Dean, he changed who he was. He changed exactly who he was because of Dean. And so I think Cass was like really the only character, I think Benny to an extent too, but I think Cass was the only character on the show, at least that you got to see for more than one episode, and you got to see him for many seasons, that had a profound respect for Dean. And that was beautiful to see, because this was someone who looked at Dean and really, really saw who Dean was and the true heart and soul of who Dean was. And nobody else seemed to want to see that or really see it. And here was this angel of the Lord, this being that has been around for century upon century, seeing the humanity in a man and having that humanity save him. And what a beautiful relationship that is, and what a beautiful commentary on who Dean Winchester is at his heart and soul. I mean, to watch that through the eyes of an angel of the Lord, it's like, you know, it's just it's a beautiful thing to watch. And I think the episodes where you see where it's just Dean and Cass, and you don't have Sam there, you don't have anybody else there, you really see that deep friendship and how they kind of really learn from each other. And it's not a one-sided relationship. And Cass doesn't need Dean to save him. Not saying Dean hasn't saved Cass. And Dean, even though Dean has literally been saved by Cass, literally pulled from hell, it's not necessarily something Dean needs, but he gets. I think Cass is one of the only characters in the show that has ever truly saved Dean. And yes, he was charged with doing that, but he still saved him. Yes, I understand Sam has helped to save Dean. I understand that, but I think it's a little bit different. But I really, really love their friendship. And I will say, I love Dean. I will defend Dean when probably shouldn't defend Dean. I will say one of the few times I thought what Dean did was horrible was when Dean did kick Cass out of the bunker. I understand why he did it, but I mean, honestly, and I know they also probably did it because they couldn't have Misha Collins on that much. honestly, he could have sat down and spoke to Cass and explained the situation, and then Cass would have understood and Cass would have left. And so that to me was like a really that I think was really not a very I don't I'm not on Dean's side. I'm not thinking that's one of the few things where I'll be like, no, because Cass doesn't understand what it is to be human and he doesn't have a home and you're kicking him out. Whereas, and I honestly think Dean would have sat down and explained the situation to him. And if he would have explained the situation to him, it would have been totally different. But I know that really tore up Dean because second for Dean, I think in his level of love and care is Cass. Cass is right below Sam. He just is. Whether you see it as romantic or not. And I know people out there like to deny this and say Dean doesn't love Cass, but Dean deeply, deeply loves Cass. Deeply. You see it in his face. And I know people have criticized his reaction in 15-18, but it was very Dean. Dean isn't shocked. Dean doesn't believe anyone when they tell him they love him. And here's someone, saying that basically, because I love you so much, I changed my whole thing. You saved me. You saved me in a very deeper way than just saving my life. This character, of course, is not going to immediately say, "Oh, I love you too," and because that's not Dean, because he would be like, "Wait, this isn't real. You don't really mean this. Nobody could actually feel this way about me." But he does love Cass. You see that deep loss in his eyes when he's sitting on the floor and Sam called. He doesn't even answer the phone for Sam. And you watch him grieve Cass every time he loses Cass. That grief is very deep and profound, and there is no denying that he loves Cass. Whether you see it as romantic or not, you cannot say that he doesn't love Cass. And I have read that on Twitter. It's mainly from people who like a particular ship that we are not going to be talking about because it's gross and icky. Sorry, but no. But it's a lot from those people that you will see people say, well, Dean doesn't really love Cass. That's because Cass is a threat to their whole thing, because Dean does. Dean just absolutely 100% does. That's his best friend. That's the best friend he's ever had. That is someone who has seen him at his lowest. That is someone who literally repaired him from nothing. That has made him laugh when he couldn't laugh before. That is someone that has taught him a lot as much as he has taught him a lot. That is someone that he was able to have an equal relationship with that he really had never had ever before that we had seen. So, yes. Yeah. So, see, I do like other characters on this show. There are actually a lot of other characters I like on this show. Well, for time-wise, since we're almost at 2:45, I apologize. 2 hours and 45 minutes. I mean, I apologize to my panel here, but we're going to skip over another relationship you want to mention. We will return to discussing Dean Winchester because I don't think we can leave it at here for my own sake. And I know my panelists love me for that. So I'm sorry we're skipping over that, but I'm not going to skip over this because I do want to talk about this because I want to know, Paula, what your favorite romantic pairing or pairings are in the world of Dean Winchester.
First off, it would be Destiel, Dean and Cass. And I was late to jumping on the Dean and Castiel bandwagon. It wasn't until I don't even remember what season it is because it's been a while since I've seen the later seasons and I'm not that far in my rewatch, but it's where Hannah basically made Cass choose between the angels or Dean, and Cass chose Dean. I was like, oh, of course he loves Dean. I mean, that just said it right there. So that I would have to say is still my number one pairing. My other favorite pairing is, it's all fanfic, but Dean and Donna. I know, right? And all you got to do, just read Who Wants to Live Forever by a Human Female.
Yes!
I know you've read that one. And that was the first one I read, and I was like, oh my God, yes. Dean and Donna together. And,
Same.
and I love those two together anyway in the show. Because they're just so great in the show together. But that fic, if you haven't read it, just read it and you'll understand why those two belong together too.
Yes, I'm on that's what, because I didn't ship them until I
No,
read that fic.
same.
Oh my god.
I was like, I saw the
This is
tags on it and
amazing.
I was like, huh, okay. Well, okay, we'll give it a try. And I love that story. Seriously, yeah. Even if you don't think you would ship them, read that fic. It will totally change your mind.
Yes, and it's got some really I love it,
It
and it alternates between point of views that are, so
mhm.
it's yeah.
It's got some really good scenes in it too. Some really
Oh yeah.
hot scenes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Yes, yes. Even before, there's a scene in there where Dean does push-ups
Oh.
and over Donna, and it's before they even
Mhm.
yeah, it's holy crap when I read that scene.
And
I
just
think
her
that's really
little
what pushed me over the edge.
her nicknames for him, her little endearments towards him. Oh, God, it melts my heart. Anyway, so yeah.
Yes, yes, and also that writer also wrote another one called that has like, holy crap, the sex scene in that called Professional Distance, and it's another AU, and Donna is a romance writer and Dean is an editor. And I don't know if you read that one too. You
I
should
did
read that
not
one
read
too.
this one. I need to go. Okay, I have
Yeah.
some research to do later.
Yeah, there's a scene in a diner and yeah. So, yeah.
Looking forward to that read.
Yes, go read. It's by the same person who wrote that one. Yeah, so yes. And then I'll give you some other ones too, because I read a lot of there's not as much out there as there should be.
There needs to be more.
Yes. So, but yeah. So Susie, I know definitely one of yours, just like I knew definitely one of Paula's. But what are your favorite romantic pairings?
Oh man. Let's see. Dean and himself. I, I feel like that's a romantic pairing that should be explored more.
Hey, there are fics out there with that, okay? I'm throwing that out there.
Oh yes, I know, but I just mean in the sense of like maybe that would have been good to explore on the show. It's like Dean has a little eat pray love journey that would have been great. He learns to, he comes to terms with himself, learns to love himself before anybody else. It's one of mine. It's Dean. Yes. There's that one, and then there's Destiel, of course. I'm gonna reveal something about myself. You don't know how many like wing kink fics I've read about those two, and it's a lot. That's like this is a pandemic in the epidemic pandemic. It's a thing in the fandom, and like I never knew that it was like a thing. And so like the first time I read one of them, I had to like go to Google and actually like figure out the scientific logistics of that before I started reading more and was like, it's fantasy. This is great. It's fun. But yeah, there's that one. And honestly, like I have not like, and this is an opinion formed entirely on its own beside reading, like I have not read any like fanfics related to this, although I feel like given the recommendations I now should. But one pairing that I did like, and even when I first saw her come on the scene, was Donna Dean. Because I feel like they would be very good for each other. And I feel like their just relationship overall would be very. I even saw that from like the first episode that she showed up, where she's kind of like eating the donuts, and he's just he's just like, "Oh, you have donuts? Fabulous!" And I'm like, "Yes, Dean. Yes, we love this." Like, he doesn't give a crap. Like, you'll get to enjoy food with me? Hell yeah, let's do. I love this. But now I'm like I wrote down the one you said. What's the author?
A human female, right? Isn't that what it's? Isn't that?
Paula,
Yeah.
what's the author?
A human
A human
female.
I must
female. A
know.
human female. Yeah. I'll put these in our private DM, but for everybody out there, it's a human female. And we'll put some links to some of these fics in show notes and stuff. But yeah, and those are Who Wants to Live Forever is the best one. And then there's also the one that I mentioned, which is Professional Distance, which is the sex scene in that, holy moly. But yeah, but they're also just really well written, and I'm very picky about the way Dean is written in fanfic, and he's written very well in both of those, especially in Who Wants to Live Forever. So yeah. Well, I shipped Destiel for a long time. I will still read Destiel fanfic. I shipped Destiel first in fanfic only, and then I started seeing it on the show. And then I will be honest, a lot of some Destiel shippers, not obviously not my two panelists, turned me off to the ship mainly because a lot of them would put didn't like Dean or would say horrible things about Dean. And I was like, how could you want him to be with this character you love if you don't like him? And so I will be honest, it turned me off. I think some fanfics I don't like because of the way they write Dean. But I still love reading them. I will still read them. And I want to say, if they had, it is canon, but if they had actually had them shown the relationship, if they had actually gotten together on the show, I would have been perfectly A-okay, fine with it. I would have been fine with that because I do think they would have made each other happy. And I do think Dean loved Cass very deeply, and Cass was very much in love with Dean, and I would have been fine with them getting together. Just because I stopped shipping them as much doesn't mean I wouldn't have been fine with them being together. I want to say that. And I am very sad for the Destiel shippers, the way they were treated by the show. I want to say that. They were queer baited left and right, and I am very sorry for that. So I would have been fine with them together. My other one is Dean Donna, which actually is known as Deanna. But yes, they are. As I said, I'm plugging my own fic again. That's my pairing in that fic, and it doesn't happen until part 5. But I do put them together because I do think what I love about that pairing is I think they both have their own self-esteem issues, but I think they make each other better. And what I always loved about Dean in the actual show, in the canon of the show with Donna, is there's this moment when I don't remember which season, but it's an episode and they're mentioning Donna. It's after season 10. And Sam says, "Oh, you mean fat sucker Donna?" And there's a look on Dean's face that is so great of like, you know what, asshole? Don't talk about her that way. It was the way it was said, and just the look on Dean's face is just perfect. And what I also love about the first time you meet Donna in the episode Purge, which actually I think is kind of an underrated episode overall. But in the first scene, when they're eating donuts, they are eating donuts exactly the same way. Their mouths look exactly the same. They get powdered sugar exactly the same. I mean, go back and watch that. It's so funny. And there is another fic by Dean's Dirty Little Secret. And it is a Dean Donna one, and it's a series, and it turned into a series because everybody loved this first one. And it's called it starts out with One Thing. Yeah, I believe that's it. One True Thing or One Thing. And it's a one night stand with Dean told from the woman's perspective, and it's Donna, and it's all told like way like young in his 20s, Dean and Donna. have a one night stand, and then when they see each other again is in the Purge episode, and it goes back and forth, and she thinks Dean doesn't remember her, but he's like never forgotten her, and it's really it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So I highly recommend that too. And then there's other ones too. I'm gonna DM a bunch of them to both of you. And then another one that I've yet to meet anyone else who ships this, and I understand because this is totally an odd pairing. I actually wrote another fanfic where this is kind of just a background part of it. Mainly, the fanfic it's an AU, but it's mainly just about John and Dean's relationship, called "Hold Back the River." But in there, the character Tina from About a Boy, and I'm talking about the adult version of Tina here. When they are in the bar and they are talking to each other, there's something about that scene where Dean is so comfortable with her and at ease with her. And I just think they have great chemistry. And so I ship those two. This is like a totally out there ship. I understand that, but those two as well. And I actually think people are too hard on Cassie. I want to say that because I think Cassie was actually really cool. I mean, of course she's going to freak out, you know. So I like her too, and Benny to an extent as well. So yes. Okay, so my panelists, we're almost at the 3-hour mark. Oh my gosh, man, I'm gonna love editing this.
I'm surprised we're not, like at the 4 or 5 hour mark here yet.
This is why we're gonna do the separate ones. I knew this was gonna happen. I was prepared for this. It's okay. This is what I'll be doing on Thanksgiving, is editing this. So this is the one that both of my panelists want to jump through the computer screen and smack me for. So what's your favorite Dean fanfic, Paula?
Okay, so I had a hard time with this because there's so many of them, and then we're like, okay, well maybe we'll just do the authors, and then I remembered one that I haven't read in a while, and this one, oh, it's called "And This Your Living Kiss" by Opal Bullets, and it's Dean is a poet. He's published poetry under a pseudonym, Jack Allen, and he's just a mechanic. I think he was taking care of his dad, and his dad dies, and he moves to New England, I believe it is, to live with Sam and Eileen, and I think if I remember right, they've adopted Jack, or are adopting Jack as a toddler, little Jack. And while he's there, he goes to see Missouri Mosley, who's a dean at a college, and she encourages him. She's like one of the only people that knew that he wrote this poetry. I think her and Charlie are the only ones that knew about it. And she encourages him to audit a class that Cass is the professor of. And during this class, they actually talk about and analyze the poems that Dean wrote. And through the course of this, he starts writing poetry again. And it's just, and of course they, there's death deal by the end of it and all that. But it's just, I love reading the fics where they kind of explore different facets of Dean and put him in these different situations of, oh, he's a writer, or he's a poet, or he's a painter, or things like that. And this was a really good one. He kind of works through some of the issues that he had with John and through his poetry. And there's another series where he's a poet, and I can't remember what it is. I'd have to find it, but he works through his issues of losing Mary and writing poetry about her. And just anytime you have Dean as a poet in fanfic, I love it. So that's my recommendation.
I don't mean to keep bringing up my fic, Paula, but
I need to
my
read your
therapy
fic. It's
fic,
on my list.
because I have him write poetry in that fic. I have him write stuff because that's one of my headcanons, is that Dean would be an amazing writer. That's one of my
Right.
so I will definitely have to check that fic out, because that's one of my headcanons, is that Dean loves writing, and that's something he wouldn't tell people because he doesn't think people would care. But I had that headcanon that he is a really good writer.
I need to
And
find that other story then and send you a link for that one because I think you'd like that one too.
Yeah. So I don't mean to keep plugging my fic, everybody. I'm really bad at doing that stuff anyway. It makes me feel self-conscious. I keep doing that. But it's so funny that you said that because I do have Dean do that as kind of a spoiler here, I guess. But he does explore that. And one of the first person he shows his poetry to, other than his therapist he actually talks about in there, is Donna. So I just want to
Love it.
it's not in the romantic part. It's more in the friend part. But I'm just letting you know, I do have him because even though that's more of like he's a hunter and all that stuff, so it's not an AU, but I did put that in there. So because I love that. So I'll have to definitely check that out. So and like I said, even if I don't ship them as much on the show, I still love reading Destiel fanfic, depending on how it's written, because I'm very picky about the way Dean is written. So I trust you, so I'll have to definitely check that one out. I feel like there was another one where he was a writer too, but I can't think of it now. But
I've read a few of them where he's a writer or a poet, and I have to go do some digging to find them because I have way too many people that I subscribe to.
but yes, that's one of my headcanons. So when you said the poet part, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely gonna have to check this one out. So Susie, I know you're already angry at me for this question. But did you pick one?
It's so hard to pick. There's so many. Oh, I would just like to say first and foremost, first and foremost, there we go. When I seek out Dean fanfics to read, I like looking for specifically AU versions, ones where it's either alternate universe, human setting, alternate universe, modern setting, just alternate universe in general. Because I like seeing where people's imagination, like, and creativity takes them, or so, and just seeing what they do. But my one that I was thinking of last night because Erin and I talked about this, and I was like, I can't pick. There's so many. This is okay. So hold on. Before I say what it is, I'm gonna put out a plea for people to help me find this fan fiction. All right. So there was that I read that it was like an alternate universe fanfic about Dean and Kaz, and in this fic, Dean kind of came across a fallen Castiel in his backyard as an angel, but they're both kids, and it was like in the middle of winter, I think, and he just found him in his backyard, and he's like, "Oh, there's a child with wings in my backyard." And Mary was like, "Oh, sure, this is also very weird, but okay. We'll give this child hot chocolate." And then it explores the relationship with Kaz as they both kind of like grow up and see each other in different points in their life until eventually they become a couple. But I had it on my phone, and then my phone deleted the tab that it was on before I could save it. And I am so mad about that. Because usually, like, after I'm done reading a fic, I'll put it in my like bookmark section, but I had not done that at that point, and so I lost it, and now it's gone forever. So if anyone knows what fan fiction this is, or have any idea which one it is, and can point me in its direction, please help. But one that I read, and one that I was reading last night to kind of like refresh my mind about it, and one that I kind of wanted to talk about, was this one called New Heaven Over a Brand New Sky. And it's also very much a alternate universe human setting fan fiction, and it's about Dean kind of getting back in touch with Sam after they haven't been talking for like about 4 years, and he has him over to visit him for the first time in a long time. But he's and also at this point he is in a relationship with Castiel, and the fic kind of explores how kind of like nervous he is to introduce Cass to Sam because Sam, and I just think it's a because Sam comes over and he brings Jess, and they have this really sweet moment where they're able to kind of like talk things through and just kind of rebuild kind of bridges that they'd burned almost in the past. And I liked it. I thought it was really sweet. I just wanted to bring this up. I need to look up who the author is. Sully My Good Name. That's who wrote it. But yeah, just like check it out. See what's up.
Oh.
There it is.
So I'll have to put links to all the fics that we end up mentioning on here just so that people can find them a lot easier. And this is one I've mentioned before, but it's my favorite. And that is, but I'll give the trigger warning on this, but that's The Kinks by Ash and Cass. And it is a AU BDSM fic. Usually, and it's a Destiel fic, and usually with Destiel, if they're dealing with BDSM, it's usually Cass is a dom and Dean is a sub. This is the exact opposite. And while the whole situation, it's one of those situations where like this actually, in the world of BDSM, this probably would not happen and it'd have to be done in a very different way. But they meet because Dean used this service that Cass was using, and there was a mix-up, and Cass was sent to Dean's cabin and was actually supposed to be sent to, and actually it was supposed to be a woman that was sent to Dean's cabin. And so this is also Dean dealing with his sexuality, his bisexuality. Cass is also bi. This is very much so. If you do not like BDSM, I want to stress, do not read this fic. Even though I love this fic, do not read it because it's very, 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 very graphic, very heavy into that. But it's handled with deep care. And for someone who likes that stuff, it's very, 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 this person did research, and you can tell that they did research. And they even have like a dom drop, which you don't normally see. And it's very interesting how they handle Mary's death in this AU. There's issues of body issues and stuff like that. And I think it's mainly told from Cass's point of view, but there is, and usually I only like stuff from Dean's point of view or a mixture, but I like the way it's handled a lot. I love this fic. I've read it a couple of times, and I think it's if you're into that stuff, it's hot as hell. But if you're not into that stuff, I want to stress again, you're going to hate this fic. So do not read it if you cannot handle that stuff, because it's not just light spanking. It's a lot of stuff. So know that. Read the tags. She's very good at the tags. They are very good at tagging. So read that. But I do love it, and it's my absolute favorite. Yeah. Okay. Well, lastly, oh my gosh, this episode, I should have known. So lastly, I want to know, we all hate the finale. We all hate what happened to Dean. So what would your dream ending for Dean have been? And since there are these rumors circulating, they're just rumors, people, unless it's been, I don't know, they're in the middle of a convention right now, and since they can talk about stuff, I don't know. But there are these rumors circulating that the show is coming back or that there's a movie. So these are rumors, okay? So I also want to know, would you want the show to come back? So Paula, both of those.
So I think it will at some point, just because honestly, I don't think anybody's a bigger fan of Dean Winchester than Jensen. And I personally don't think he did like the way Dean died at the end. No, I realize he kind of had to toe the line and and not really go into that when that it all went down. But I don't think he was happy with the way it ended. So I totally think he's gonna do his own fix it fic. And I'd be okay with that, as long as it's handled with care, and the confession is addressed in whatever way that happens. I know a lot of us ship Dean and Cass. If, Dean doesn't reciprocate in the way that Cass loves him, just handle with care, please. That's all I ask. But if I was going to have written that ending, it would have been totally different. Dean would not have died. They would have saved Cass from the empty. And I see for Dean retiring from hunting, and I really kind of see him in a role similar to Sonny's, where he kind of is maybe a mentor or a caregiver to other kids that have gone through similar to what he has, because he would very much understand that. And if you watch Dean through the series, he's so good with kids. He's so good with them. And I think seeing him in some kind of role like that, where he's, maybe running a home for kids that need a safe space, I would love to see that for him. So
I love that. I absolutely love that. I really love that. I love that. I really do, because I really liked Sunny. I wish we could have seen Sunny again. I really,
Right.
yeah, I like that. I like that idea a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So, Susie, are you there, Susie? Are you just thinking deep in thought? Your thoughts? What would be your ideal ending, and do you want the series to come back? I don't know if Susie's with us or not. You're muted. You're muted.
Oh wait.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I did it. I unmuted myself. Yeah. I just keep having this trouble where I can't unmute myself to say anything. Paula knows. It happened while you were gone. I was like, I did it. I think I would like it to come back, because hopefully we get different writers who do different things and address some stuff that was left unaddressed. And maybe hopefully Jensen does do a fix it. We can only hope. Because I really love Supernatural, and it was one of the fandoms that kind of introduced, one of the very first fandoms that introduced me to this amazing and wonderful community of people. So if there's any more of that in store, sign me up, because I do really love these characters, and I'm always going to want to see them pop up anywhere, be it officially or in fics and such. But what I would have liked for Dean was to just let him be able to retire from hunting, and to have him just do whatever he wanted. Whether it be working on cars, or just or writing, or just running a pet shelter, maybe with a lot of dogs and different animals. That would have been nice. Just anything other than what they gave us. Because no, it was terrible. But I would just want a better, happier ending for him, and something that didn't involve going out in a hunt, because that was something that he kept saying over and over, was like, oh, I know what it's going to happen to me. I'm just going to die in a hunt. That's my life. That's my lot in life. And it's like, no, there was a chance to give him something more than that, and you let him die in a hunt. You jerks. most than anything, I just wanted him to be happy and to find some sort of peace, because it's what he deserves.
Yes, for the dream ending for Dean, and I love the sunny things. I almost want to steal that, but I would have wanted him to live. I would have wanted him to still have the dog, though. That's the one thing I would have kept, is Miracle, because the scene in bed where he's hugging that dog is just the most precious thing in the world, and I'm so glad that they made it canon that Dean does not hate dogs. So I loved that. That one made me very happy. But that'd be the only thing I would keep. I do think the confession scene would need to be dealt with. I would want Cass back. And I would want Dean to get a break from hunting. I've always thought that Dean could be, and I know it's not a complete break from hunting, but I do think Dean could be a great Bobby in the fact that of like helping hunters with lore, but not going out on hunts himself. So retiring, but helping with like doing covers, like helping with their covers, that kind of thing, but making it known that he wasn't going to go back on the road. I love my writer headcanons, so something like that, or even him being, I know it's written a lot in fanfic with him cooking, but I do think that's something interesting that he does do, which is very much a caretaker. I think he does it because it's caretaking, and he also loves food. And the reason, which we didn't talk about this, we could do a whole episode about Dean and food, because I think that's a very complicated thing that has to do with his childhood, honestly. But or just doing whatever he wanted to do, but helping people. And I do think, I love Paula's idea, because Dean was such a father figure to a lot of kids. Like, he was such a natural father, and he loved kids. Like, he really did love kids, and he respected kids. He really respected kids. And I loved the scenes of him with children. And yeah. So he would live, he would get to be happy and have some sort of retirement. He would definitely deal with this stuff with Cass, whether that was for all my Destiel shippers. I would want them to get together for my Destiel shippers. I would be perfectly fine with it, but I'd want that for them because I think they deserve it, honestly. I think you've suffered enough and you've been yanked around enough that I think to have that confirmation that from both of them that it was real, and to see it physically. I'm not talking about necessarily sex. Although if the show came back, I want it to be R-rated, okay? I don't want it to be on the CW, but it probably will be. So anyway, so that's what I would want. I just want Dean to be happy, and I want him to realize that he is allowed to be happy. And he gives himself that gift of being happy and retiring. For coming back, I have always wanted a supernatural movie. Always. I still want a supernatural movie. When the finale happened, I went, well, there goes my dream of a supernatural movie. But then Jensen did the Winchesters, which we did a whole special Patreon episode on that. So could become a Patreon supporter to hear Paula and Meg and I talk about that series. I actually never finished it. I know. It's horrible, even though I know Dean is in it. I've seen Dean's scenes. But I do agree. I think, and Jensen has said the opposite. I understand this, but I do truly believe, because why else would he want to do this? The reboot the Winchesters. I'm sorry, but I do think that's deeply seated in the fact that Jensen does not like the way the show ended. And I know he has said at first I hated it, and then I came around. I think he still hates it. And I think he would want to fix it. And I think if Jensen has his way, that will happen. And I understand there's some bad blood around some of that stuff. I get it with the whole Jared thing, whatever. But I would like to see it come back to give a better ending for Dean, because usually I'd be like, no, but I do. What I don't want, though, I'm putting that out there. I do not want a reboot where it's like a brand new cast. I do not want that. Okay. No. Okay, so I'm putting that out there. I either want just a short 16th season that fixes everything, or I want a movie that fixes everything, okay? And if it's a movie, please, please, please somehow get Dean to have more tattoos. Yes, there we go. And let that man just say fuck a few times. So, because come on.
Like, we all just want to hear Dean Winchester swear, okay?
Yes.
Including Jensen. He wants Dean to use the big boy words too. He's said it.
Yes, come on. Give that to Jensen. Yep. Okay, well, we are going to wrap up this very short episode. Oh my god, this is longer than our Barbie episode. I'm not surprised, but still, this is longer than any of the supernatural episodes that we released when we covered
Yeah, it is.
and we only scratched the surface. I mean, yes, we did a whole series of those, so I guess that doesn't completely count. But I will let us do our 6 Degrees of Finn Whitrock segment, since that returned last week, because we haven't done it in forever. I have an honorary member of the Finn crew, Paula, who I can tell by the look on her face did not play.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
But I have Susie's a member of the Finn crew, and she is required. So now, Paula, you're not in the Finn crew for a little bit until
I'll redeem myself at some point. I'm on probation, yeah.
But Susie is a member of the Finn crew, so the only people I require that to play are my members of the Finn crew. So Susie, I know you love playing anyway. So Susie, how did you connect Finn Whitrock to Dean Winchester?
Okay, we started with Jensen, who was in the movie My Bloody Valentine 3D. Which, fun fact, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, that was the first thing I ever saw Jensen in.
Oh, really?
Before Supernatural, which is why I was like, yeah, which is why, like, I was like, oh my god. And then I saw him in Supernatural, and I was like, wait, okay. And yeah, but anyway, so My Bloody Valentine 3D, he was in that with Jamie King, who was in Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, with Josh Brolin, who was in Gangster Squad, with Emma Stone, who was in The Amazing Spider-Man, with Kelly Absol, hope I'm saying that right, who is in an upcoming horror movie with Finn that comes out, I think, next year. It's called Don't Move. It's
Yeah, I'm so
produced
excited
by
for that
Sam
one.
Raimi, which, I feel like it's gonna be campy, or at least I hope it's campy because Raimi is involved. But yeah.
I am so excited for that horror film. To say, because Finn is playing a serial killer in that, and I'm very, very excited for that. I'm sure we'll be covering that on this podcast in some way, shape, or form. So, well, I went a very simple route. So Jensen got his start on Days of Our Lives playing Eric Brady. And Eric Brady, I still watch Days of Our Lives, by the way, everybody. Eric Brady is still a character on the show, played by a totally different actor. But he was part of one of my favorite soap ships, Eric and Nicole. And you've seen scenes in The French Mistake. There is a scene of Eric and Nicole in there, and I love it. And fun little trivia fact, a big reason Jensen were able to enjoy Jensen and something outside of soaps is they wanted to renew his contract. Days of Our Lives did, which is a huge thing. And he was told by one of the other actors, and I believe it was actually Deidre Hall, who plays Marlena Evans, pulled him aside and said, "Do not renew your contract. You can do more than this. You are a great actor and you should get out of this." Pretty much told him that. So, fun little trivia about that. I just like to say that. And I think soap actors deserve more respect. And I think both Jensen and Finn Whitrock are proof of this, because who else started in soaps? And all actors cross over. This is Finn Whitrock did on All My Children. So they both started in soaps. two fantastic actors. So give soap actors more credit, people. That's our lesson from this whole episode. That's what you can learn. Yeah. So yes. Okay. Well, we are going to wrap up, and we will return to this character at some point. But we're going to close up because, oh my gosh, the editing on this is going to be so much fun. No, I'm excited about it. I'm gonna release the video version. The people that are watching this on video, you're gonna get to the unedited version. So enjoy. Errors and all. So Paula, where can everybody find you?
Okay, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky Social, one of those other ones that I can't remember the name of, TikTok, all of those at It's My Sandbox. And I'm on Twitch at Artemis75. That's my gamer tag. It's ARTEMISZ75. And then, of course, on the Discord channel. So, come and tell us all your thoughts on Dean on the Discord channel. And yeah.
Be kind, I will block you. No.
Oh, right. Yes, it is a Dean Winchester love Discord channel only.
Paula is the one who always remembers we have a Discord channel, and it is in our show notes, so you can easily find it there. But yes, come join us, come talk at us.
Oh, tell us
at
your
us.
fic recs too.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
Give us
please.
your Dean fic recs. Send us those, please, yes. And Susie, where can they find you?
Yes, I can be found at _crafting_cryptid on the Grammygrams with all the other fun little crackers and nuts and bolts and things. And my dog's Instagram is in my bio, and that's Benny_Pelucita. And we both are very sporadic in our posting. It's like seeing a whale breaching the water. It's very rare, but when it comes, it's such a treat.
Oh, wow, that was amazing. Thank you both. You don't want to follow me. You want to follow Fergie, who Fergie is a Dean fan. I'm sure of this. She has been subjected to a lot of supernatural recently. So follow her on TikTok at Schroeder and Fergs. That's SCHROEDERANDFERGS. It's long and I keep forgetting it, but it's where the link is in the show notes as well. Be sure to like the show on Facebook at facebook.com/itsafandom_thing_pod, on Twitter at fandomthingpod. No, it's in that one. On Instagram at itsafandom_thing_pod. If you have, on TikTok at itsafandom_thing_pod, where I've been doing a lot of Dean Winchester centered TikToks. If you have any feedback, show notes, if you'd like to be a potential interview guest on the show, Jensen, I will get over my nerves. Unlike when I got a photo with you and I left my purse in the photo op room and had to go back in there, embarrassed as hell, to get my purse. If you want to be on the show, I will not ask you about pranks. I do not give a crap about pranks. I will just ask you about the craft of acting. That's all I want to talk to you about. Okay. So if you would like to be on this show, holy moly, I would love to interview you. Feel free to reach out to us via our website. It's afandomthingpod.com. Click the contact us button there, or have your people do it, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Excuse me. Speaking of interviews and speaking of Jensen, because this actually kind of correlates, we are going to be releasing our next episode that will release on Tuesday. It's a special interview episode with the editors. They also both have chapters in the book, and also frequent panelist Tanya. They co-wrote a chapter in the book as well. But I interviewed the editors of Soups Ain't Always Heroes, which is about the psychology of the boys. And I should have had the names like pulled up right in front of me, and I apologize because but this is all about the show The Boys, and it goes into the psychology of the characters. There are different guest authors for each one. It's a great book that's available on December 5th, I believe it is. And it's a fantastic book. And there is an in-depth chapter about Soldier Boy, played, of course, by Jensen Ackles. And then there is an interview in there with Jensen Ackles as well. So just so you know, and this book is the editors and who I have the interview with is Dr. Lynn Zubernis, who is part of the Supernatural fandom and has written and co-written lots of books about Supernatural, and they are known as Fangasm on all the social media. I'm sure if you're a Supernatural fan, you know this account. And also Dr. Matthew Snyder. I loved this interview so much. So I'm so excited that I get to bring it to you because the strike is over. So I finally get to bring it to you. So look for that dropping on Tuesday. And see, Jensen, you can listen to this interview and then you can see, oh my gosh, I would love to be interviewed by this person. See, it will come full circle. I promise they reached out to me. The publisher reached out to me about this. Okay. This was not like anyway, I'm like using this as a way to never mind. I'm dropping all of that. But I can't because on the video one, unless I go back and edit that out, I can edit that out on the video. Anyway, my panelists want me to shut up, but we've been talking forever, so I'm a little loopy now. But while you're on the website, consider becoming a Patreon supporter for as little as $3 a month, and you get bonus content. You get ad-free episodes. So click the support us tab or the link in the show notes. And on our next episode, we are going to be talking. I'm like, what are we talking about? We are kicking off December with a look at remakes of television shows. Speaking of rebooting, so reboots and remakes of television shows, and that is going to be a Saxy Ladies episode, which if you don't know who the Saxy Ladies are, they are Carla, Meg, and Tiff. So I'm excited about that. And then I will give you news about the whole December then, but I'm going to stop now. So anyway, until next time. My gosh. And remember, it's a fandom thing. Black Lives Matter and stop Asian hate. Woo, we're done. Oh my gosh. Goodbye. Let me end this recording.